Thanks, Megan.
Okay, we're now live and you're good to go.
All right, thank you. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the August 6, 2020 regularly scheduled meeting of the Kentucky Board of Education. Members, thank you for being here. We're glad to see you. I think we're in good shape technically, but I do want to announce a few notes as we have been doing about conducting virtual meetings. The meeting must comply with the requirements of the Open Meeting Act. Accordingly, KBE members must ensure their video is streaming and they can be seen throughout the duration of the meeting. Members, please do mute your mics at this time, but ensure that when you speak, that you do unmute so that your comments can be broadcast to the public. Every time you speak during the meeting, please unmute your mic, state your name, and take a short pause so that the video feed will catch up with you. And for any items that require a vote, as we have been doing now for several months, a roll call vote will be necessary to record the vote of each member. At that time, you will simply say, "I," state your name, vote, and then your response. Please silence or turn off any electronic devices that may cause disruption to your sound feed at this time. And Jennifer, I think we're ready for a roll call.
Sounds great. Good morning, everyone. Joanne Adams.
This is Joanne Adams. I am present.
Claire Batt.
Claire Batt, present.
Holly Bloodworth.
This is Holly Bloodworth. I'm here.
Mike Bowling.
This is Mike Bowling. I'm present.
Alvis Johnson.
This is Alvis Johnson. I am here.
Cody Polly Johnson.
This is Cody Polly Johnson. I'm here.
Patrice McCrary.
This is Patrice McCrary. Good morning. I am here.
Sharon Robinson.
This is Sharon Robinson. I'm here.
Lee Todd.
This is Lee Todd, and I am here.
Lou Young.
Good morning. This is Lou Young. I am present.
Lieutenant Governor Jacqueline Coleman. I believe she'll be joining us shortly, Chair.
Thank you.
And I believe we have Dr. Amanda Ellis here for CPE President Aaron Thompson.
Good morning. I am present.
And Allison Sloan.
This is Allison Sloan, and I am present.
Thank you, Chair. You have a quorum.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thanks, everyone, for being here. Our first item of business today is the nomination and election of the Kentucky Board of Education Chair and Vice Chair. KRS 156.029 requires that the KBE elect a chairperson at the first regular meeting of each fiscal year. So at this time, we will take nominations from the floor and proceed with the election of a new Kentucky Board of Education Chair and Vice Chair. Nominations are now in order for the office of Chair of the Kentucky Board of Education, and no seconds are necessary.
Lou, this is Mike Bowling.
Yes, Mike.
I make a motion that that the board appoint you to continue on as chairman of the board, and that the board vote to continue Sharon on as vice chairman of the board. And I move that all other nominations cease at this point.
Okay, thank you, Mike. I do know, I'll ask Todd to make sure we can move forward with that motion. I will note that under our rules, Sharon and I can serve an additional year as chair and vice chair. Are we allowed to do that in one motion, Todd?
So I would recommend that we open it up for discussion in the event that any other member wants to make a nomination or has a comment on Mike's motion. And then following the discussion, assuming that you have this motion on the floor, then the board can take a vote. But other individuals may want to discuss that further.
Thank you, Todd. I like that approach very much. So we do have a motion from Mike for me to serve as chair another year and Sharon as vice chair. But let's open that up for any discussion or questions that you may have.
This is Claire Batt, and I'd like to say that I think that Mike's motion is a wonderful one. I would love to see the two of you continue in the same position. You add so much to the discussion, and I think your leadership is very appreciated. So, Mike, I'm so glad you made the motion because I would have done the same thing.
Thank you, Claire, and thank you too, Mike.
This is Patrice McCrary.
Yes.
I would like to agree with that comment and go on record for saying the leadership thus far as our chair and vice chair for these two individuals has been nothing less than superior. You're appreciated and we are fortunate to have you.
Thank you very much, Patrice. We really appreciate you guys and the support. I will add that I asked Sharon if we could remain a team doing this. I have relied so much on her wisdom and discernment in the process and feel like I have a partner for life there. So I appreciate her very much in that role as well. Any further discussion? Any other nominations? Yes, ma'am.
Might I just say that it has been truly an honor working with this board as your vice chair. And I really appreciate the opportunity to continue in the partnership with Lou and the staff at the department to support all of our very ambitious goals.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Lou, this is Allison. I'd just like to go on record to say that I agree with everything everyone has said. I think the two of you make an incredible team, and I look forward to going on in the future with you in the positions you're at.
Thank you, Allison.
And this is Lee, and I'll just second all those emotions that have been made, or emotions that have been mentioned. And thank you for the time you must spend on this because you've really put a lot of time into it and done an excellent job. So continue.
I agree also. I'm 100%.
Thank you, Holly. Thank you.
We couldn't have better leadership. Thank you so much. We hope you will continue to serve.
Thank you, Joanne. You guys are amazing. Thank you so much. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we do have a motion for Lou Young to serve as chair and Sharon Robinson to serve as vice chair. At this time, we will have a roll call vote.
Sorry, my mute was a little delayed. Joanne Adams.
Joanne Adams, my vote is yes.
Claire Batt.
Claire Batt votes yes.
Holly Bloodworth.
This is Holly Bloodworth. I vote yes.
Mike Bowling.
This is Mike Bowling. I vote yes.
Alvis Johnson.
This is Alvis Johnson. I vote yes.
Patrice McCrary.
This is Patrice McCrary. I vote yes.
Cody Johnson.
This is Cody Johnson. I vote yes.
Sharon Robinson.
Sharon Robinson, I vote yes.
Lee Todd.
Lee Todd, and I vote yes as well.
And Lou Young.
This is Lou Young, and I vote yes.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, everyone. I echo Sharon's sentiments that it has been a pleasure to work with this board, to get to know you over the past 8 months, to see your willingness to engage in 20 meetings when you thought you were signing up for 3 or 4 at this point in the year, and just the thoughtful way you approach this work on behalf of the children and families that we serve in public education across the Commonwealth. So thank you for your service, and thank you for the opportunity for us to continue to lead through the 2020-21 school year. At this time, I will turn it over to Patrice McCrary, who chairs our awards committee for consideration of approval of the recipient of the Kelly Award in Education Partnership. And Patrice, you may be muted.
Sorry, you would think after all this time I would have it down pat.
Mistake.
Sorry. On behalf of the awards committee, I move approval of candidate 8 as the recipient of the Kentucky Board of Education Kelly Award for Business and Education Partnership. This award is given in the fall of each year to a Kentucky business person or business who has partnered with public school or district to provide outstanding leadership that promotes school improvement and student success. Based on the review of candidates during the award committee's July 28th meeting, we determined candidate number 8 best demonstrated the characteristics set forth by the awards criteria. And I will say that we had some excellent individuals and groups that were nominated. Accordingly, I would like to ask the chair for the board's approval to recognize candidate number 8 at the board's October regular meeting.
Thank you, Patrice. We'll accept that as a motion from Patrice to recognize candidate number 8. Do we have a second?
So moved.
Thank you so much, Mr. Johnson. We have a motion and a second, and I will just add quickly a big thank you to Patrice and Claire, who serve on our awards committee, which means reading several applications, and I am able to enjoy being a part of that committee as well, and would echo Patrice's comments about the excellent slate of nominees we had this year. Any further discussion? All right, Jennifer, we'll have roll call.
Joanne Adams.
This is Joanne Adams. My vote is yes.
Claire Batt.
This is Claire Batt. I vote yes.
Holly Bloodworth.
This is Holly Bloodworth. I vote yes.
Mike Bowling.
This is Mike Bowling. I vote yes.
Alvis Johnson.
This is Elvis Johnson. I vote yes.
Patrice McCrary.
This is Patrice McCrary, and I vote yes.
Cody Johnson.
This is Cody Johnson, and I vote yes.
Sharon Robinson.
Sharon Robinson, I vote yes.
Lee Todd.
This is Lee Todd, and I think number 8 is a well-rounded candidate, and I vote yes.
And Lou Young.
This is Lou Young, and I agree with Lee and everyone else, and I vote yes.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Jennifer. At this point, we will consider approval of summary minutes from, are you ready? June 3rd, June 4th, June 11, June 12, June 25, July 6, July 7, July 10, July 15, and July 28, 2020. Yes, we really have met all of those times. Those minutes were distributed to you in advance. Are there any corrections to any of these minutes at this time? If not, I'll open for a motion for approval.
This is Patrice McCrary. I move that we approve all of these minutes.
Thank you. We have a motion from Patrice. Do we have a second?
This is Holly Bloodworth. I second.
And a second from Ms. Bloodworth. Thank you. Any discussion? All right, Jennifer, we'll take a roll call.
Joanne Adams.
This is Joanne Adams. I vote yes.
Claire Batt.
This is Claire Batt. I vote yes.
Holly Bloodworth.
This is Holly Bloodworth. I vote yes.
Mike Bowling.
This is Mike Bowling. I vote yes.
Alvis Johnson.
This is Elvis Johnson. I vote yes.
Patrice McCrary.
This is Patrice McCrary. I vote yes.
Cody Johnson.
This is Cody Johnson. I vote yes.
Sharon Robinson.
Sharon Robinson. I vote yes.
Lee Todd.
This is Lee Todd, and I vote yes.
And Lou Young.
This is Lou Young. I vote yes.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Jennifer. The next item on our agenda will be to suspend standing committee meetings. As you know, standing committees are established in the KBE policy manual, but for today and all of our virtual meetings, due to the teleconferencing limitations we face and the inability to live stream 2 standing committees simultaneously, and for the sake of efficiency, I would ask the board to entertain a motion to suspend standing committee meetings. Is there such a motion?
This is Holly Bloodworth. I make a motion to suspend those committee meetings.
Thank you. We have a motion from Ms. Bloodworth. Do we have a second?
This is Joanne. This is Joanne Adams. I second.
Thank you. We have a second by Ms. Adams. Any discussion? Hearing none. Jennifer, would you please call the roll?
Joanne Adams.
This is Joanne Adams. I vote yes.
Claire Batt.
This is Claire Batt. I vote yes.
Holly Bloodworth.
This is Holly Bloodworth. I vote yes.
Mike Bowling.
This is Mike Bowling. I vote yes.
Alvis Johnson.
This is Elvis Johnson. I vote yes.
Patrice McCrary.
This is Patrice McCrary, and I vote yes.
Cody Johnson.
This is Cody Johnson, and I vote yes.
Sharon Robinson.
Sharon Robinson. I vote yes.
Lee Todd.
This is Lee Todd, and I vote yes.
And Lou Young.
This is Lou Young, and I vote yes.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Jennifer. We always love the good news items portion of our agenda, so we will jump right into that and ask board members to share items from your region, starting with Joanne Adams.
I am happy to share some information from Oldham County Public Schools. And early in July, the school started getting some social media, seeing some social media talk about whether they were going to have to wear masks to school, and seeing a lot of negative things about that on social media. So they started a campaign to change the narrative for the county, and they decided to launch this social media campaign, Mask Up Team Oldham County. And they started on July the 9th, and that was before we had a mask mandate in the state. But they wanted to go ahead and normalize that idea of always wearing a mask. And so they asked community members, alumni of the school, people who worked for this district, and students to send a picture of themselves wearing a mask and telling why they wore the mask. The masks are mandatory now, but the district believes that they need to keep sending this positive message because it is so vitally important for opening our schools that people wear the mask. And the more that we see other people wearing these masks, the more it's going to seem normal. And that's really important for our kids. And I encourage you to go to their Twitter account and look at all of these different people who have sent in their pictures. There's custodians, cafeteria workers, student leaders, teachers, and my favorite has to be the principal here from Camden Station Elementary, Stu Martin, who said that, why do I wear a mask? Because sometimes it's fun to be a ninja, a villain, and a superhero. And I think that's a real good message for our kids because they can see the fun in wearing the mask and know that it's important to wear them also to keep other people safe. So thank you, Oldham County Schools. You've done a good job in promoting wearing masks in our schools.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Joanne, and congratulations, Oldham County, for that positive public message campaign. And then we will turn to Cody, Polly Johnson.
Good morning. My good news report concerns the Career and Technical Education Student Organization. Regardless of the continued impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, career and technical education students all across the state have persevered through these challenging times and continue to make Kentucky proud through a variety of state and national awards and recognition. Thousands of career and technical education students from all 8 of the state's career and technical student organizations have spent the spring and summer months competing in virtual competitions and leadership conferences at the state and national levels, many of whom earned top national rankings for their award-winning projects, skill demonstrations, and personal degree programs. We want to extend a special congratulations which are in order for Hannah Jones from Powell County High School and Logan Justice from Paul Lawrence Dunbar High School for being elected as 2 of only 10 officers for the National Executive Council of the Family. Career and Community Leaders of America's Student Organization. Their outstanding leadership at the national level over the next academic year is sure to make Kentucky proud. The Kentucky Board of Education celebrates the accomplishments of these students and their hardworking CTE teachers to ensure that learning and leadership opportunities have remained a top priority throughout the COVID-19 crisis. Congratulations on your hard work and many deserved accolades. We are honored to celebrate you.
Thank you so much, Cody. And I believe we met Hannah and Logan back at the February meeting in person, as I recall. Yes. And Cody, I know that career tech ed is a passion and high interest area for you. So thank you for sharing that great news.
Yes, and I'd like to send a shout out too to Logan Justice's parents, Grover and Heather, who I went to high school with in Pikeville.
No way.
Yeah,
Oh,
so that's great. Mm-hmm.
The Kentucky world. Thank you so much, Cody. And Allison, to you.
Good morning. I get the privilege to talk about the National Braille Challenge competition. Our students have faced a lot of challenges in the last few months across different districts, across the whole state, and lots of events they wanted to participate in. But this year was especially a great year for Kentucky and the Braille Challenge. Not only was the Regional Braille Challenge the largest in our state's history, but we had 2 Kentucky finalists from our public schools. These hardworking students include Cameron Blakely of Davies County School District and Jenna Claywell of Adair County School District. Jenna placed 3rd overall nationally, so way to go, girls. Both students were in the sophomore category, so out of the top 10 students in the country of that age group, 2 of them were from Kentucky's public schools. What a great statement that is to our school system. The Kentucky Board of Education congratulates Cameron and Jenna for this amazing accomplishment.
Excellent. Congratulations, ladies, and thank you so much, Allison. Do we have a slide on that good news item, Jennifer?
I believe it's up on the screen. Double check me, you all. The National Braille Challenge.
We can see it.
It is.
got the lag this morning on my
Yes.
side.
I
Sorry.
think we're having some lag issues this morning. Sorry about that.
No worries. So if the next slide is ready, I'll go ahead and share on behalf of the Kentucky Board of Education our heartiest congratulations for Laura Raganas. Laura is a digital learning coach and statewide program lead from the Office of Education Technology, and Laura is on the call this morning. Many of you may have met her. David Couch says she's like Cher. She only needs one name, and if you hear Raganas, you know who she is across Kentucky. She was recognized as the recipient of the 2020 Making It Happen Award from the Kentucky Society of Technology and Education, KISTE, at their July statewide Virtual EdTech Leaders webcast. This is an international award from the International Society for Technology and Education. Laura has done amazing work across Kentucky with digital learning coaches in school districts around the state, as well as leading the establishment of Kentucky's first IT Academy for Kentucky K-12 students to provide a meaningful and marketable professional IT certification. Laura also established Kentucky's Girls Who Code clubs, and now Kentucky has more Girls Who Code clubs than any other state. You can read more about Laura's statewide impact in a recent article on KentuckyTeacher.org. And if you would just in your mind join me for a round of applause for our own Laura Raganas. And we have one final good news item to share at this time. I'm trying to surprise him just a little bit because I know he won't like it, but our own Kevin Brown was recognized at last week's Kentucky Association of School Administrators Summer Institute as the recipient of their prestigious William T. Nalia Award. This award is presented annually to an education leader who, quote, reflects a spirit of innovation and cutting-edge leadership while bringing high levels of success to all children, end quote. I cannot think of a more deserving recipient of this award, and obviously neither could KASA. I was fortunate to be present when Kevin received the award, and I must tell you that his acceptance speech was incredibly moving as he paid homage to his former Paint Lick Elementary School principal, Ms. Mary Adrienne Davis. As Kevin told the story, he recalled how much respect and admiration he had as a boy for Miss Davis, and he said he always sat up a little higher when he heard her high heels clicking down the hall. What I loved about the story is that Kevin has become the kind of leader who also commands that level of respect. I, for one, sit up a little taller when he's around too. So in addition to recognizing Kevin for receiving the Nalia Award, I want to take this bittersweet opportunity to acknowledge that this is Kevin's last KBE meeting as Interim Commissioner of Education. I assure you, I'm the only one that's weepy this morning. Kevin is not at all. None of us knew that he would take the reins just before the advent of a global pandemic and would find himself thrown into an unprecedented time of unpredictability and volatility, a time when we need strong and decisive leadership more than ever before. I believe that Kevin's service as our commissioner did not happen by chance, but rather by an act of providence in support of Kentucky's children, our educators, and the families we serve. Kevin Brown has risen to the challenge with the knowledge, skills, and abiding humility that it takes to navigate through the turbulence with an unwavering commitment to doing what's best for kids. So please join me for a virtual round of applause and standing ovation in your mind as we say thank you to Kevin Brown. Somebody's clapping. Thank you. All right, thank you so much. And Kevin will have a chance to speak here in just a minute and share some remarks also. The next tough segue here, the next turn is to a report from the President of the Council on Post-Secondary Education. Sorry about that, Amanda. You get to follow lots of love for Kevin. I don't believe Dr. Thompson has been able to join us yet, so I think I turn it over to Amanda at this time. Is that right?
Actually, he wanted to share his comments. If it's okay to defer to him a little bit later, if that's possible. Jennifer, I don't know if that can happen, or Lou.
Do that. Will cue me.
Absolutely. So perhaps we can come back after the Lieutenant Governor. Actually, it looks like she's joining us now, and Commissioner Brown. Absolutely.
Okay, excellent.
Thank you.
Don't let me forget, Jennifer.
No way.
Thank you. All right, so at this time, we will turn to our report from the Secretary of Education and Workforce Development and Lieutenant Governor, Jacqueline Coleman, for her report.
Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I literally just joined you like 5 seconds ago because I was on with, talk about impeccable timing. I was on with the Jackson Purchase Chamber group, and they were actually talking about school reopening. And as I finished up, they were bringing in some local superintendents. And so it just continues to be our focus. So just to give you a few updates on what's going on in the cabinet, we have continued to work as closely as possible with KDE to help with the reopening of schools across Kentucky. This is certainly a heavy lift for everyone, from superintendents to families. And so we have extended some flexibilities in our guidelines, through our guidelines for schools to reopen. You know, one of the first things that we recognized was that we were not going to be able to predict too far into the future. And the extent to which we could mitigate this virus was not really clear from the beginning. And so the best thing that we could do in my mind was to extend flexibilities to school districts so that they could meet the needs of their families and their kids. In order to do that, we have removed some barriers that have existed in what we would consider to be traditional educational practices. And some of those are, I'll give you those flexibilities and kind of explain the intent behind them as well. The first is that we extended unlimited NTI days to every school district. We did that in the event that there were districts out there that preferred to go back digitally and to not go to in-person classes, and we wanted to make sure that that was a possibility for them. We removed the average daily attendance requirement for funding. As we thought back, as we started to think through how schools could go back in hybrid models where some students may be in school at some point and out of school at another, we did not want that to impact the funding for our schools. And so by waiving that requirement, schools can use previous year's attendance to continue to receive that funding. And then if they decide that they want to go to a hybrid model where not every student is in the building at the same time, they had the leeway to do that. We also made sure that for those districts that go back in person in some form or fashion, that we protected our faculty and staff. One of the concerns was and continues to be what happens if our faculty and staff are exposed to COVID, and they would have to be tested and quarantined until they got the results back. For our teachers who were going to work every day and doing what they needed to do, it was not fair for us to ask that of them and then ask of them to also utilize their sick days for potentially 14 days at a time because they needed to be tested. Our educators are the front line, and they are exposed to more humans between kids and their families than just about any other profession that I can think of. And so we needed to make sure that they were protected. And so we allowed districts to extend an unlimited amount of COVID-related emergency days for the purpose of quarantining. And then finally, the last announcement that I made was that we are allowing some leeway in the facilitation of online instructional models. And that came directly as a request from our school community. I had one superintendent who specifically said he was considering some students that opt out of in-person classes and stay at home, and also teachers who might be immunocompromised who need to stay home, matching them up. But as you can imagine, in high school, that's very difficult because the certifications are so specific. And so the instruction would remain with the certified teacher, but we are now going to allow schools to make sure that other teachers, potentially even from other areas of certification, can support the facilitation of that online platform. So whether it's a technical assistance, whether it's a simple question about how to move forward in a module or something like that, that allows our teachers to maintain relationships with students that they may have formed in the past as they move forward as well. So it really is truly creating a village of educators to help support our kids. And so those have been the things that we have done, obviously, to help with COVID-related emergencies and moving forward in schools. We continue to work on equity issues. I'm very proud of the I guess it was the declaration that the board read last time that we all voted on and agreed to. We continue to have conversations with KDE about how to implement implicit bias training for all school faculty and staff across Kentucky, and how we can better support the Kentucky Academy for Equity in Teaching to make sure that we recruit more teachers of color into our profession. One of the focus points that we continue to hear could be a barrier for families and students moving forward is Wi-Fi access. We say rural, and certainly rural Wi-Fi can be a problem. I mean, I'm from rural Kentucky, I know, but also there's urban issues as well in terms of access and opportunity. And so our cabinet is working with, we are looking down every rabbit hole to find ways that we can extend Wi-Fi to every kid that needs it, because schools are able to pretty much provide devices as needed. I won't say completely, but we've certainly come a very long way in regard to devices. But now the question is, how many of our kids actually have access to Wi-Fi and can use those devices at home? So we are looking at public-private partnerships. We are looking at cities and states who have already done this work. We are looking at Kentucky Wired. We are literally looking down every rabbit hole, and I hope to have some good news to deliver about that soon, because this is certainly an equity issue for our kids and, quite frankly, their families as well. So we met yesterday in the governor's office with our legislative staff, and we are starting to work out our legislative agenda for the next session. We last session worked very closely with KDE to help support that agenda and to move folks forward, and to move those ideas forward for folks. And so we'll continue to do that in the next session as well. And I look forward to being able to have an entire cabinet agenda that focuses on early childhood through post-secondary. And that's something that I think is really important. And last, I got to deliver some good news yesterday at the press conference. I got to announce that the very first monument for a female in the state capitol is coming to us next year. It was supposed to be this month, but given COVID and we don't want to, put people at risk, we're going to put it off until August of next year because of the Equity Day. But it is Miss Nettie Depp, and she was an educator. So I'm really excited that we have a monument for a female in the state capitol, or we will. And I'm even more excited that every child on a school field trip that comes to the Capitol gets to see a teacher enshrined and honored in the way that she should be. So that's some really great news, and I look forward to the day that we get to unveil that, which will be about a year from now. So that wraps up my update.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And I am so excited about the statue to Miss Nettie Depp. I have some friends who are educators today, and she was their aunt. So that will be an exciting day for sure. I'm going to already plan to be there, Lieutenant Governor. Thank you. Board members, do you have questions for Lieutenant Governor, keeping in mind that we will be delving into some school reopening issues here in just a minute, but while we have a chance to speak with her, would anyone like to ask any questions?
Chair Young.
Yes, please.
Patrice McCrary. And
Yes.
I do. Thank you, Lieutenant Governor, for updating us on all of this. We've watched closely. You can rest assured that we are not surprised by any of this. I do have a question about the COVID-related emergency days. My understanding on that is that it is left up to the districts on how that is implemented. Do the teachers have to use any or all of their days before this takes effect, or does it automatically work for them as emergency days? And how many districts are or are not going to implement this?
So that's a great question. When we extended this opportunity to our school districts to be able to basically make these decisions at the local level, our intent was for any teacher who has to quarantine, they would default to those COVID-related emergency days. Now, if they test positive for COVID, then technically they're sick, and that's a sick day, right? That would be just like any other issue. But the problem that we can see coming is if teachers are exposed and have to quarantine for a certain number of days until they get negative tests or whatever be the case, that's just not fair. It's just not fair to ask teachers to come to work and expose them to that many families. And then every time they're exposed, potentially, they would have to dip into their sick days. And so those emergency days are intended to be what they default to anytime that there is an issue with quarantine and exposure.
And just as a reminder, board members, this is a regulatory item on our agenda for today as well.
Lieutenant Governor Malvis Johnson, I don't see it as being any fair if you put teachers in a potentially dangerous situation and they actually contracted disease and they still have to use their sick days. I mean, they could be hospitalized for 3 or 4 weeks and there go all of their sick days because they were one of the brave ones who decided to go and teach their classes in person. So I don't know if there's anything that we can go back and address about that. I certainly appreciate the fact that they're quarantined, but I just don't think that's fair. If I go and teach my class, knowing that there is a potential that I'm going to be infected with this disease, that now I've got to use my sick days. And I'd like to hear your response on that.
Yeah, and that's something that I'm perfectly happy to address with this group and any comments and recommendations that we have. I know the commissioner and I will take into account and figure out how we can make it work best for all of the folks in our school system. So I'm happy to hear. I think Chair Young said we were going to discuss this later in a little bit more detail. So I'm happy to listen to those concerns too.
Excellent.
Lynn?
Yes, please.
Lieutenant Governor, this is Mike Bowling, and I serve on a regional industrial commission, and we're actually taking over the Kentucky wired system for 5 counties and 16 cities. In doing so, we've got some extra funding, and we're using that to provide internet connection and Wi-Fi connection for students in rural Kentucky that don't have access to it right now. And that's a big problem, as you know. And so matter of fact, we're going to vote on that today to go ahead and implement that through the 5 counties that my board's over, which is Harlan, Bell, Letcher, Knox, and Whitley County. So that's an idea that you guys may want to look at with other industrial foundations, because a lot of us are actually putting the Kentucky wired systems together in our regions.
Okay, thanks for that, Mike.
All right. Thank you again, Lieutenant Governor. And I appreciate that comment so much, Mike, as we see this kind of building coalition around support for reliable internet access in the home. In terms of P12 education, it's no longer a nice to have, it's a must have. So thank you for those efforts, as well as everything you've done. The word for 2020 is flexibility, and the work that you and the governor have done to move mountains to make sure that school districts have the flexibility they need to safely reopen without regulatory barriers has been impressive, and as well as your communication. So thank you so much.
I have a question. This
yes.
is Bloodworth. I was just wondering about the equity training for teachers. Is that something that's being developed right now? Are schools doing that already? Is it something schools are developing? What does that look like? Or is it still in process?
Are you talking about the implicit bias training?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we know that JCPS has a very robust professional learning program around implicit bias. So I have met with them just initially to get some feedback on their practices and processes. We also have meetings coming up with K-State and Simmons College to get some feedback there. And we will begin to kind of piece this together in a way that we can make sure that every faculty and staff across the state will have access to this training, especially because while some districts may be less diverse than others, that doesn't mean that it's not needed, obviously. So we'll continue to work together. It's I would say we're in the very beginning stages. I don't even know if I would call it in process yet. But we're doing our reconnaissance and doing some research and figuring out the best way to do this. JCPS, like I said, has a really good program because, as we all know, sometimes professional learning can be a checklist. And we certainly don't want that. And JCPS's implementation is initial at the beginning of the school year, and then they continue to weave it into the professional learning that they do throughout the school year. So it becomes embedded in their professional learning, which I think is really powerful. So again, we're looking at how to implement this in the most effective way.
Thank you.
Lou,
Yes,
might I just offer this other good news, if you will. There is an effort underway from the leaders at the UK Press, which has responsibility for getting research and resources out the door for all of the state universities. There's an effort underway to try and inventory the resources that have been developed within the university system in our state, some of which were made available to teachers in Northern Kentucky in an amazing webinar that I had a chance to watch, so that we can make these resources more widely available and more widely accessible for all teachers, all professionals across the state. So this effort is just getting underway. There is, I think there's just really insightful leadership coming out of the UK Press and the foundation that supports the press. I think that's the Clark Foundation, to provide resources that are being developed within our own state related to bias awareness, and also resources associated with history and social studies that help us to enrich our curriculum, help us to make it more challenging and more supportive of our students being able to address modern social justice issues. So that work is just getting started, but I feel that that is evidence, further evidence of determination across the state to address the issue of equity, access, and quality in our education system.
Thank you so much for sharing that. That's great to know.
Excellent. I love it when all those pieces begin to come together. Thank you so much. At this time, board, we will turn to a report from our interim commissioner of education, Kevin Brown.
Thank you, Chair Young. Thank you for the recognition, even though I've stated to Jennifer that that recognition was not in the notes, and I have the notes, so I'll have to have a conversation with Jennifer and Chair Young after the meeting. I was honored and humbled by the award by KASA. It goes without saying that, like most all of you, and we've heard you speak to this, we were all influenced by our teachers, administrators, and I had some of the best in the country. And I highlighted Mrs. Davis and her impact, and she still has an impact on me. She's still a mentor for me, and there are many others as well. I can remember when Chair Karam called me to ask if I'd be available to be the interim commissioner. And the first thing I thought of, I started seeing people, the faces in my mind of the team at KDE. And I thought to myself, they are all still there. So if they are all still there at KDE, I think this will be something that I would be interested in doing, knowing that there is a team there, and I have worked with that team before, and I know that the talents of that team, and by the team, I'm talking about the entire department, but also the leadership team. And that has made all the difference. That's the reason I got the award, because of the team. And I'd mentioned that and accepted that on behalf of Team KDE. I can't say enough about them. Dr. Glass, the best gift I can give you is that they are all still here, except for a few, and they are now doing other things that indirectly supports KDE, such as Dr. Ellis. So I put, and I've heard other previous commissioners almost to a person say this, it's the best state education agency team that they've ever encountered in the country. And again, I believe I have evidence on my side, not just bias. So I just want to say again and thank everyone for their support. While it's been challenging and grueling, there have been a lot of rewards, and there have been some fun times, and I will always cherish that. Will be a highlight of my career. I would point you in the direction of the commissioners, the interim commissioners report. I apologize. I don't think we were able to post that until last night. You may not have had a chance to read that. That's because I kept telling Jennifer and others I wanted to add things to that. And I'll speak about one of the major things we added that I felt like I had to say on my way out. But we do have some information and quite a bit of information in there about the work we're already doing on as a result of the challenge the board has issued to the department and to the state, as well as the challenge the lieutenant governor has issued about racial equity. I keep telling the staff, and I believe this will be true, that this is not going to be a document that is just simply relegated to the minutes of the board. This is going to be a document that is guiding us, a North Star document, as I mentioned. It needs to be dog-eared. It needs to be included in materials, and then that's what we intend to do. We've already started on that. I didn't want to just say, well, let Dr. Glass handle that. So I wanted to get some things started, knowing that he's also committed to this work. It's one of his 3 top priorities, as he has mentioned from day one. And I'll just mention briefly, we've already created at the department a cross-agency team for trauma. It's called the Trauma and Resilience Team, and that's in partnership with colleagues from the Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental and Intellectual Disabilities. We've released a guidance document that's hyperlinked in my report to you about how districts can facilitate conversations about race-based stress and trauma. That went out on June 3rd. And then we already have a contract with, and as this was alluded to, I think, by Lieutenant Governor, with the Kentucky State University, their Center for Research on the Eradication of Education Disparities. You may know that as CREED. And they're partnering with us. We've already had Dr. Roger Cleveland at our last all-team KDE meeting, which we, of course, do virtually, and all KDE team members either are there live virtually or they watch that if they can't do that at that time, including the staff at the School for the Deaf, School for the Blind, and the area technology centers. he began, this is not just a one-time thing on implicit bias. This was an introduction to implicit bias, knowing that this is going to be a journey for everyone. And so we will be having Dr. Cleveland back working with Creed, and then that will also impact the conversation of how we can have this same type of training resources available for local school districts, as the Lieutenant Governor discussed. We've also had some conversations with the University of Kentucky and others. So we know we have the expertise out there. We know we have the resources. We're going to keep connecting with those, and I know Dr. Glass will continue that right on. And so I'm pleased that we were able to have at least begin this initial work. We're going to talk in depth about COVID issues and reopening guidance. I did include a hyperlink again to the 18 guidance documents that we've issued over the last 6 months. The majority of those coming, of course, since May 15th when we started thinking about reopening. And we have been going over those with school districts every week, with superintendent webcasts, with the various advisory groups, and then just having great conversations with our partners, and then knowing that these guidance documents are evolving and changing, as we said they would, because the virus is evolving and changing. And then that means our guidance needs to be nimble. And we actually, and this will, I think, be discussed a little bit later, we actually have issued a one-page update to school districts on some of the changes that have been made in working with public health. Some of that based on feedback from districts, some of that based on the expertise of public health in monitoring what the virus is doing. So I'm proud of our work in that area. Guidance is, I think districts probably get tired of us saying, well, there's a guidance document for that, but that's the best thing we can do for districts, provide state level expertise, but also honors and recognizes local control and the local expertise, and be able to blend those two and have a tool that they can do the best thing for their community is so important. I must also mention that yesterday Forbes issued a report and results of findings of what they determined through a study to be the best public schools. And I know those reports are only as good as the methodology, and we're still looking at that methodology. But it was good news for Kentucky nonetheless. I'd just like to read to you a quote, and this is related to some of the COVID work that we're dealing with. And the report said, and I quote, "In terms of making digital content and instructional materials available outside of the classroom, 7 states stood out as being exceptional: Alabama, Delaware, Indiana, Kentucky, Maryland, Massachusetts, and West Virginia." In addition, that report from Forbes listed Kentucky as number 16 in an overall ranking. Again, we're looking at the methodology there, but it's I can't say enough. This is not something that just happened over the last 6 months. This is a foundation, and particularly the work, the mention and the shout out there about the digital content. This is a foundation that's been built at KDE and in our state, and that's been with cooperation from the General Assembly and many other partners for over 30 years now, through the Office of Education Technology, the work at David Couch's shop, Dr. Foster's work with non-traditional instruction. All of those things have built this foundation. And yes, we know NTI was not perfect. We did not reach all the kids we needed to reach. It is not as good as in-person instruction, but we were able to pivot quickly. We were able to deliver and provide those resources to districts, and I think in a better way than many other states. And I'm proud of that, because I've been around for about 16 years. I have deep friendships with others that have been around longer that have seen this over the years, and that's an example that this is education we have to work at it day after day, year after year. A lot of it's building foundations, and I'll talk about in a minute some of the negative things. We were able to do a lot of this without appropriate and adequate funding, and we're running on fumes, and I'll talk about that in a second. I also just want to let you know the transition with Dr. Glass is going very well, as you can expect. He is not required to be here yet, but yet he is here. And it is a great way to do a transition. And so we are having conversations daily. He is engaged, of course. He is reading. I came into the office yesterday. I had to sign some things, and I got a COVID test, and I noticed there was a family. There was a mother and two children playing paddleball out on the front steps of the Sauer building, and I thought to myself, that's a nice looking mother and two children, and I'd wondered who those folks were, and then I see Dr. Glass coming out at the end of the day, and that was Dr. Glass and his family, and they are already engaged in Kentucky, and as you can see, he's here with us live from the Kentucky Horse Park, and so it's an exciting time, and he's already been able to have surprise appearances at the superintendent webcast, to the Student Advisory Council and other places. And so it's just a great way to have a transition. So I just want to make sure you understand that that's going well. And it's also, I'm enjoying working with him as everyone else is as they get to know him. And unfortunately, I have some kind of negative news, but regarding funding, this is not a surprise, but I feel like I have an obligation, particularly as an outgoing interim, as I've noticed some things that you need to be on your radar. Funding, of course, is not a new issue. I would point you in the direction of the actual details in the interim commissioner's report, and I hope everyone watching looks at that. This is not just another bureaucrat telling you that we need more money. I've seen a look in Robin Kinney's eyes and a tone in her voice, and in Karen as well, regarding KDE budget matters that I've never heard before. And in the past, we've always had some budget issues, and we've been able to kind of do some things and work magic, and that's come to an end. And there are a few highlights in there I want to go over. We had to sell off a capital asset recently at the Kentucky School for the Deaf, and we're going to be forced to use some of those proceeds to pay the light bill. That we can't operate like that long term. This is something that that has to be just beyond the state board's request every 2 years to the General Assembly for additional funding. This has to be a broader conversation, education funding in general with the whole state. We need to re-engage with the chamber, and we have done that and have had some really good conversations recently in our business community. And I just want to issue that challenge to all of us. Going forward, this is also something, obviously, it's not going to be fixed in the next budget cycle just because of the structure of Kentucky's economy, the hit that it's taken due to COVID-19. And then even in a good year, we have revenue issues. And so that is a concern to me. I'm concerned about the ability of KDE to continue to provide guidance that is needed, particularly in a changing landscape. As I said earlier, we're running on fumes. I'm not just saying that to exaggerate or to be cute, but that's the truth. The good work that's been done over the last few months, I don't know how it's been done other than adrenaline and caffeine and just the sheer determination of the people at the department. And we're getting almost to a breaking point as far as staffing goes, and then with the different and the complex needs that school districts have, and then the General Assembly. We have a lot of mandates, and a lot of those are good, and they're really good policy decisions, but the ability of us to meet those is really going to be hard in the future without a really hard discussion about education funding. And it's obviously the state level is one thing, but then this also is an issue at the local level. And the CARES funds, of course, very much a welcome aid from the federal government, but we need another infusion. I'll be issuing a letter today to Senator McConnell about that. So I want everyone to make sure you read that part of my report, and also members of the public and the education community and members of the General Assembly, please read that. I asked staff to gather that. I touched a little bit on it at the June meeting, but very serious concerns about funding for the long term, and this has to be a conversation. But the most important part of the commissioner's report today is actually, I am yielding the rest of my time to Dr. Glass to officially introduce himself to the Commonwealth and share additional remarks. And Dr. Glass, I'm sorry that I'm leaving you with a great team, but I'm also sorry about the doomsday funding scenario, but I wanted to make sure I was honest with what I have seen over the last few months. But Dr. Glass, welcome, and I'll turn it over to you.
Well, thank you, Kevin, and thanks for the kind introduction, and all the accolades that you've received are well earned. I know that you received that reward from KASA, and I have heard so many things from people in the department and educators around the state and other people in Kentucky that are so grateful that you stepped into this role and have served Kentucky so well. I've also, as you mentioned, been working at the department the past few days, trying to get up to speed on many of the items that you've been managing over these past few months, and the things that we'll have to handle in the months ahead. Of course, what's on everyone's mind right now and that is consuming all of the time that educators and others in the state are thinking about is how and if we can reopen school in some form with COVID, if that has to be under the conditions of non-traditional instruction or some limited in-person instruction, or can we eventually move toward a set of procedures that allow us to have greater in-person learning. That's a struggle that's not unique to Kentucky. It's also one that I spend multiple hours and late nights every day working on in the district that I serve in Colorado. We're struggling with that very same question as our districts all across the country. So this is there are no easy answers. I think every superintendent, every school leader will tell you that we are having to choose from a set of bad options, that every one of our choices has a significant downside, and we're going to have to make accommodations and choices and then live with the consequences of those choices, whatever they are. I also have had the opportunity to visit with the staff at the department to get up to speed on a couple of other matters that are of import to the department, including outreach and communication, just as my transition takes place. And Interim Commissioner Brown, again, you've been fantastic in supporting me in that and making sure that I have the connections that I need in the state, that I'm tracking the major issues that you've been working on, and that I have access to the staff. And the briefings that have been provided by the staff have been really helpful, so that I'm able to hit the ground running. And then you mentioned the anti-racism and equity work. That, of course, is a major priority for me. We've already started thinking about how we can configure staffing at the department to better, even further support that effort, in addition to what's the work that's underway and that has been done. I acknowledge and respect that that's a priority of the governor and lieutenant governor, and that it's a priority of the state board, and echo the statements that were made in the resolution that the board passed in support of that work. And then in regard to the funding questions that we have coming up, so I want to move over just a little bit so I don't have this halo behind me. It's not any effect that I have. It's the sun coming in. But just in regard to the funding questions that are coming up, this is also not a matter that's unique to Kentucky. Schools across the country are wrestling with what the fallout, economic fallout from a COVID-induced recession is going to create. And really, I think everyone's just waiting to see how tough it's going to be, how bad it's going to be. And is this something that where we can economize, where we can do without for a short period of time, or shrink back the size of our organizations incrementally throughout Kentucky, so that we can continue to serve students at the same level and with the same services we have, or are these more foundational and larger scale cuts that really require structural changes? These are all challenges that we will face over this next year, but I also believe that that they are challenges that we can overcome. There will be a time that we will get through COVID, and this virus won't rule all of the decisions that we have to make and govern our lives. And that time hopefully is coming sooner than later, but that's a temporary effect. The economic impact related to COVID is also a temporary effect. It may be painful in the short term, but we'll get through that too. There's ongoing and overdue work when it comes to anti-racism and equity that we need to do, but there's also work in that area already. And so we have efforts underway that need to be continued and supported and added to. So brighter days are on the horizon. I definitely believe that and can't wait to get started in the state and get to follow up on the excellent work that you've done, Commissioner Brown, and also work with this fantastic Board of Education. So with that, I'll pause and turn things back over to you, Kevin, and let you take it from there. Thank you.
I can't top that, so I think that's I should sign off.
All right. Well, almost, Kevin. The next item would be you and your team around COVID-19. Thank you so much, Dr. Glass and Mr. Brown, for your report, for your candor. We really appreciate it, and we need to make sure that Kevin's information does push out really broadly. So we'll be working with the team in that regard as well. So, Kevin,
Chair Young, I think I jumped the gun a little bit. I do need to welcome the new KDE staff. If I can do that quickly.
Yes, please.
And then I see that Dr. Thompson, I think, is joining us, and so that'll be we can have a few minutes for him to get settled, and then I think we can go to his report. We want to welcome new staff that joined KDE since the board's June regular meeting, and they are listed, I think, in your notes, but I'm also going to read them and recognize them. Normally, if we were in the board room, they would be in the room and would stand up to be recognized, and I'm sorry we can't do that. In the Office of Commissioner, Jim Gaines, Division of Communications. Office of Finance and Operations, Renee Tabor. In the School Community Nutrition, Rebecca Shepard-Smith. And also in School Community Nutrition, Morgan Rousseau, School Community Nutrition. And Tiffany Yeast in the Office of Division of Resource Management, Payroll and Benefits Branch. In the Office of Education Technology, Minaj Chowdhury. School Technology Services, Brittany Coldiron, School Technology Services also. In the Office of Continuous Improvement and Support, Sarah Snipes. In our Division of Innovation, Blake Connie. Student Success and Safe and Supportive Schools, Michelle Nichols. In our Division of Student Success, Student Engagement and Support. Office of Legal Services, Melissa Moore, Executive Administrative Secretary. In the Office of Special Education and Early Learning, Tasha Oglesby. I want to welcome all those new employees and great additions to Team KDE. Just a brief update. I did not mention during my report earlier. I know you have had some questions about Kentucky School for the Blind and Kentucky School for the Deaf. That's also, I think, included in the report, but I just want to mention that we announced on July 27th that both of these state schools will begin classes August the 24th, but they're going to offer their first 6 weeks through non-traditional instruction only. Both schools continue to have a lot of outreach to families and staff in order to refine virtual learning experiences for these students. And then obviously preparing for in-person classes later in the fall is of course, our goal. And then also just a brief update on Kentucky Area Technology Centers. Our administrators at all those over 50 facilities are working very diligently and with the sending districts to ensure that we're meeting those students' needs, and then also, of course, adhering to the state and district guidance. So that's going to be a balancing act because, as you all know, we have multiple districts sending into one and into the area technology centers, and we're going to have multiple opening plans. But David Horseman, his team, they've been preparing for this all summer, and we're going to meet the needs of those kids and meet them where they are. So with that, Chair Young, I'll turn it back over to you.
All right. Thank you so much. And thank you for the reminder. President Thompson is here, so we will ask him to share his report on behalf of the Council for Post-Secondary Education.
Thank you, Chair Young. Good morning, committee. Good to kind of virtually see everybody. It's been quite a summer for most of us and quite a busy summer. So it's my pleasure to present my report to the board. There are a few things that I do want to talk about that will not be on the written report, and I'll just start with those now. As you all know, Amanda Ellis, in which we're very proud to have on board, she will be in my stead most often when I'm not here, but we've been meeting to create a comprehensive P20 plan that really focuses on transitions, that focuses on the things that we need to be thinking about systematically in Kentucky around education. So once we get together, obviously we'll be talking with Commissioner Glass because we'll be asking him to co-chair that with me, the P20, where you've heard of P16 Council. Well, we're putting a P20 Council together that will be on steroids, to be honest with you. So we look forward to sharing that with the board because we believe it is the right way to go. I heard through the grapevine, Lieutenant Governor talked about implicit bias, cultural competence training for Simmons and others. We are working with Simmons and KSU and everyone now, obviously, on trying to get programs together with JCPS as well as others to create a better and quicker and pipeline for minority teachers. But we also know that a part of our plan CPE before this came about was to provide cultural competence training for all of our faculty and staff. We do have, we're putting together with our DEI team, I put together a fairly strong DEI group that will have a cultural competence certification. We are working with Justice Noble and the Cabinet of Justice, doing all, working with them to create some micro credentials and others for their entire, from basic training on up, as well as the state police and Louisville and Lexington. So I wanted to just kind of throw that in. It was good to hear that Lieutenant Governor mentioned that. We're in regular communications, as you all know, with campuses every week, actually, and Dr. Stack almost every week, making sure that we open in the fall to the best ability we can to protect our students. So right now we are scheduled between August 17th and 24th to open all of our campuses. We've basically, this is not exactly the case, but in general, it is the case, like 1/3 hybrid, 1/3 online, 1/3 face-to-face. We obviously have some fail-safes in there. If we need to go online, we can. Campuses are testing. We got mask policies, all the things that you can imagine that we would have in place, we do have in place. Now, that doesn't mean things don't happen, neither on our campuses or P12 campus. But we're trying to mitigate those and keep them safe. And once they do, put them in a situation where everybody else stays safe. So we are moving in that direction. Most of the classes will be over by Thanksgiving. There will be some institutions doing some online finals, but we're hoping to be done by Thanksgiving. We won't have a fall break or any of those other items. We've done a lot of stuff over the summer to make sure that digital learning is truly the best we can have it. But I mean, for people like me, who's been a faculty member for 2,000 or 3,000 years, it may take a little longer for folks like me to get skilled up when it comes to engagement. So we're taking that into consideration too, but making sure that this is not just about moving a face-to-face class online, but it's really about learning and the opportunity for all of our students to get it. We met this past week with the performance funding work group. We regrouped, if you want to call it that, several years ago when we put the performance funding model together. I was president at the time of KSU, and I'm only one of two people left that was on that original group other than Senator Givens. By law, we have to come back every 3 years. As you all know, the performance funding model is our accountability and assessment system, how well we're doing. And the metrics in there focuses on gap closing with our underrepresented minorities and low income, as well as attainment gaps and compared to the rest of the nation. I'm proud to say that we've moved that really well. Now we're going to be identifying what things aren't working, but what we were hoping that would happen at the time we put it together, we would have funding. in place, new funding to really make it work. So far, we haven't had that. So that's created some consternation and some problems, if you will. But still, even with that in mind, we are moving the dial on educational attainment for Kentucky, hoping to get to 60% by 2030. July 8th, I presented to the interim budget review committee and then also the A&R committee and talked about the effects of COVID on our campuses. So far, we've lost about $145 million, which is about 17% of the general fund that we get. Now, we've got some CARES dollars to try to offset some of that, but it's not come close yet to fully doing that. And we don't know how much more we're going to lose. For an example, we're a heavily tuition-based economy for our campus, if you will. And so it depends. Enrollment's looking pretty good, I have to say, for our four-year campuses. We also have a situation in place where we've been able, with GEAR money and some others, to provide the campuses with some relief to do some PPE and other items that they need. I've created, or CPE has created for me, a student advisory group, which we have 21 new students joining us this fall. And they're from our public universities right now. It's where we started. And we're really going to, when I came in this job a couple of years ago, we had to get, in my opinion, where the rubber meets the road. And that's getting students to talk with us at a grassroots level as well as faculty. So this past year, I created a faculty advisory group. Now we have a student advisory group, and I'm looking really forward to working with them. We've been doing tons, if you've been following us, tons of webinars on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I have to say they've been used widely and people are viewing them widely. Even other institutions other than higher ed are using it. We're happy with that. So we are really dedicated. And we've had a couple of your KDE folk with us on doing some of this. So we're dedicated to make sure that we reach out as much as possible. As you all know, CPE, we have a diversity policy, and it's really a gap closing policy. It's a diversity policy, it's an inclusion policy, and an equity policy, and it's underpinned by cultural competence, where we measure how well our campuses are inviting everybody to their campus and treating them well once they get there. So this underpins all the things that we're doing around this area. We've also partnered with a major labor market analytics group. Some of you know our focus on really connecting higher ed with the labor market on the front end and not the back end. So data and analytics underpin that conversation for us. And so we did a healthcare study. A while back, we did an engineering study. So we just finished the healthcare study. And just to let you know quickly that we're expected to jump 12% over the next decade in this area of healthcare from our baseline now. And the average jobs across the state will go up tremendously. And actually, 23,000 new jobs will be created during this time. Quickly, I'll just end the conversation with that we're having several committee meetings coming up, the Academic and Strategic Initiatives Committee. This next one is revealing to that committee what we've been doing over the last year and a half around program review, highly technologically based, that focuses on our majors and how the job markets, the market that's open to them, how much money they're going to make, and really designing our curriculum and pedagogical processes with everything from employability knowledge to what students can expect to do once they get out. So it incorporates both the quantitative outputs as well as the quality of the program. So if you get a chance to join those committees via Zoom, please do so. Chair Young, unless I got a lot more I could talk about, but I'm sure you don't want me to. So I'm gonna be quiet, and if you have questions for me, I'd be happy to take them.
Thank you so much, President Thompson. Such great information, and another example of how all of the reports today have really come together. And I really especially appreciate the work you're doing around diversity, equity, and inclusion. You bring so much, your entire organization brings so much to the table there. Board members, what questions might you have of President Thompson? I think you must have nailed the report. Thank you so much, Aaron.
All right, thank you, Chair.
And then Kevin, I will turn it back to you and your team. And board members I know have been anxious to engage in conversations around the COVID-19 mitigation and management work you're doing, as well as reopening schools. So we will spend some time on that important but difficult conversation at this time. And perhaps I actually turn it over to Karen and Tony. Oh, I'm sorry, and Sharon, you may have a question.
It's not a question, but it is a recognition that the work that CPE is doing to connect higher ed, the labor market, connect higher ed and P12 represents really cutting edge work. And I want to commend the CPE for bringing a modern orientation to the role of higher education in the economy. It's no longer the holding pattern for 18 to 22-year-olds until we're ready to absorb them in the labor market. We have to recognize that these students come to us on their way to their future and have higher ed viewed in that way, and everybody who's working in higher ed viewed in that way. And also to see the P12 system as not just the feeder system that sends students prepared or ill-prepared, but a collaborator in creating the workforce that will be the basis of our economy. So these are, it's easy to say, but in institutions that are as bound by tradition as both P12 and higher ed, those collaborations don't come just because they're a good idea. They come because they're knit together and leadership is brought to bear on making it happen. So I have to say that because I know so many places where it's just talk. And I want to be a part of the Kentucky system where it's talk and productivity.
Excellent. And Aaron, if you wanted to add anything besides a big thumbs up, but I would say that I rely so much on Sharon's broad perspective, and I always quote her around equity, access, and quality, but also around the important role that education plays in workforce development across the Commonwealth.
And let me chime in for just a second before we move on. I just want, I know we're mitigating a worldwide health pandemic right now, and that's kind of taking all the air out of the room. But the work that KDE has been doing, not just to keep our kids safe, but to keep us moving forward, the partnership that CPE has taken on with the cabinet, and we're moving forward on some higher ed workforce projects together. It's no surprise that Kentucky is doing as well as it is, and I am truly grateful for those partnerships from our early childhood all the way through higher ed, and it's going to have a tremendous impact on Kentucky's economy. And I don't know that these guys get enough credit, but they're doing amazing work, and I'm very, very happy to be able to work with both of them. So thank you, guys.
All right, thank you.
This is Allison.
Yes.
If you could afford me a minute or two, I have a bit of a statement I'd kind of like to share to give some kudos to our KDE people before they get started talking about the COVID-19 updates. In a couple of weeks, I'm going to be walking back into my school and classroom to teach children both virtually and in person. I'm going to walk in on that first day just as worried and somewhat scared as the thousands of other educators and school employees across our state. But I'll also do that knowing that this board, Commissioner Brown, the Bashir Coleman administration, our associate commissioners, and the rest of KDE staff have done everything in their power to prepare for the safest return possible. Most people know I'm not one to hold back when I feel things have been wronged against our students, faculty, or staff, but what they'll quickly learn about me is I always give credit where credit is due. The guidance documents, the weekly webinars, the councils, and all the other meetings, KDE has absolutely went above and beyond to prepare every single district to have school to the best of their ability in the middle of a worldwide pandemic. I've also been told I can be a bit impatient, so when I hear others questioning the work and guidance that's been provided, it's often difficult kind of to hold back what I'd like to say. While I completely understand the fears and the hesitations on decision-making during these uncertain times, I'd simply like to ask that we all stick together, support each other, and keep the lines of communication open. We need not give up our tradition of local control, or we shall surely regret it later. These are uncertain times, but as you know, you all have worked diligently from day one, preparing, revamping, and even sleeping in your offices at times to communicate as much as possible. In the words of the great Julius Sugarbaker, my favorite straight shooter, one of the things that I hope for is the people with power will get good sense, and the people with good sense will get power. Thank you, Commissioner Brown, and the rest of KDE for having the good sense to make the recommendations to keep us safe. And thank you to our local leaders for using your power to follow through and implement those recommendations.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Allison. That was a lovely segue to the conversation. And I can't imagine that anybody ever called you impatient. Just one note before the team begins, especially as we prepare to ask some questions. I'm flying with very limited video for some reason today. I get to see the two handsome faces of Kevin Brown and Aaron Thompson, but that's the only video I have. So Jennifer had to prompt me that Sharon had a question. So board members, if you would, when we get to the question and answer portion, simply unmute and jump in, and I will try to recognize you by name, but won't be able to do that visually. So Kevin, I think over to Karen. Is that right?
Yes, Karen, and just another reminder, you know, we organize the COVID work under project management, and this is to ensure that KDE has a long history of using systems work. Dr. Holliday had a lot to do with that. Using various methods over the last few years, deliverology and other methods, but using project management and systems to make sure we are working cross-agency, using cross-functional teams to making sure we're not operating in silos. That's been a large part of the reason why I think the guidance has been successful, is that we have operated in that way. And so that's why this agenda item is termed Project Management Update. So that's just a little background down into the weeds about how we operate at the department. And so I'll turn it over to our Chief Performance Officer, Karen Dodd. And then I think also Tony Constantine is going to have a little bit of a communications update in that segment as well.
Thank you, Commissioner Brown. Good morning, Chair Young and board members. It's good to see you all this morning. I have just a brief review item for you today to keep you informed about our efforts in managing the COVID-19 project. Joette, you can click slowly through these first 4 slides, just pause briefly on each, and I'm just going to speak briefly to these. These first 4 slides are specific examples of how we've used feedback from various customers, stakeholders, and advisory groups. These slides are in your online packet, so I'm not going to read them to you. I just want to make you aware of the fact that we are very deliberate about presenting the guidance documents to all of the relevant groups and soliciting feedback from them. We ask guiding questions in every one of these advisory groups to get that feedback from them. And each slide gives you just a little information about the groups we consulted and the purpose of that guidance document. Joette, you can go on to slide 6 and pause there. So slide 6 is a list of various ways we're sharing our guidance documents once they're finalized. So you see that the KDE COVID-19 web page is there. I provided a link for you. I'm sure you've viewed our COVID-19 page before, but I included the direct link in, just like I said, in case you wanted to view that again. You'll notice we added on that page a reopening section toward the bottom in green. We also continue to push guidance out through the Kentucky Teacher, and as part of our Education Continuation Task Force, the Pritchard Committee offered to include a K-12 section in their weekly newsletter. And so we use that to push out any items that are shared within the task force. We also upload our documents to the several national partner organizations such as CCSSO and SREB. And then we also have the advisory groups, which I've mentioned. So the commissioners' advisory groups, the superintendent webcast, those take place every Tuesday afternoon. And then a couple weeks ago, we opened up a virtual town hall, and that was in response to questions and just the anxiety that was being expressed from both teachers and parents. We continue to collect questions from all of these advisories and the webcasts, as well as the town hall, and we add them to an overall frequently asked questions document, which is also on our COVID-19 page. Joette, you can go to the next slide. Last, I wanted to bring your attention to the need sensing surveys that we conducted in June. We surveyed superintendents, principals, teachers, family caregivers, and classified staff. So these were 5 separate surveys that went out. And we're very appreciative of our KY Stats partner who created dashboards for the family survey results and the teacher survey results. My staff, Hannah Paquette and Dr. Aaron Butler, created summary reports for the other 3 surveys. And I've included a link on here in case you would like to go and look at those results on your own. The leadership team has discussed the results and any actions that we may need to take as a result of the feedback. One last thing that I'd add is that we have resumed discussions about our strategic plan and how this pandemic will likely lead to changes in our plan. For instance, we're talking about adding a finance component and racial equity. So I'm very excited to start working with Dr. Glass and to really make some impactful changes to our plan and hopefully start sharing progress reports with all of you in the not too distant future. Now I'll turn it over to Tony Cons-Tapman, and she's going to share some highlights from the Student Advisory Council. I think.
Okay. Yes, sorry, I was muted there for a minute. Yes, welcome. Sorry about the brief delay there. I was having computer issues. I just wanted to share a brief update with you. We have, since we last met, we have named 21, I think it's 21 new members to our Commissioner's Student Advisory Council. And very excited. As you know, these Student Advisory Council members are picked from your board districts, the Supreme Court districts across the state. We had our first meeting with them on the 29th of July. We have another meeting with them, official meeting set up with them on August 11th. And, but in between that, we had a KDE meeting with my team, since we oversee the council, yesterday. And I will tell you, this is a very excited group of students who are very eager to jump into some project work as it relates to COVID. As it relates to reopening schools and how they can lend their voice into some of the issues that they're very concerned about. So I think you are going to be seeing them. In fact, I know you're going to be seeing their names and their voices here in the next little bit. They're going to be working on some videos for the Mask Up KY campaign with the coverings for kids that was announced by First Lady Brittany Bashir. We've suggested that they partner with their superintendents in their districts to help perhaps collect masks and work with their districts to set up those things. These are all ways that we're encouraging them to be leaders in their communities and help so that they can be part of the solution to get back to school, which is what they also want to do. In addition, we are continuing to host all of the webcasts, the weekly webcasts that you all have mentioned, and are continuing our regular communications with our school districts and regularly updating the FAQ document, which now has more than 600 questions in there that you can find on our KDE COVID-19 website. And at any time, there's anywhere between 50 and 100 people in that document. And we are updating that daily. So if you have any questions or want to go back and look at questions that have been asked during a webcast or during our virtual town hall, all of that is on the COVID-19 website on that FAQ for districts and schools. And that is what I have for you today. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to take those for you.
I would just add to what Tony said. I can't say enough about the Commissioner Student Advisory Council. The last meeting we had with them it was a textbook meeting on how an advisory council should go. And I'm not saying how it was organized. I'm talking about how the students participated. I'm actually going to use it, and Dr. Glass, I hope you will use it. Sometimes our advisories are a little quiet, and it was excellent. I can't say enough, and this is just another example, and you're going to hear from the Pritchard Committee Student Voice team later in the meeting. You heard Dr. Thompson talk about student voice, that how he utilizes that in post-secondary. I really feel like student voice is starting to really come on to the forefront in Kentucky, and that's so good. And then also we know the Lieutenant Governor in the executive order talking about, and we'll be having a member chosen from the Commissioner Student Advisory Council that will come onto the board. These are just great developments, but it's not just window dressing here. This is they're providing actionable feedback. We treat them as adults. They get the same information that we would present to the superintendents, and superintendents are a tough crowd, but Dr. Glass, as you know, you met with the students earlier. You better eat your Wheaties the day you meet with the students. And it's exciting too, because as many of negative things we have to deal with, it's just inspirational to listen to them, listen to their ideas, and then take some of those ideas and they're actionable, things we can do at the department and in our school district. So I just wanted to give you that perspective on how excited I am to see this continue and grow, and that students are taking the rightful place that we need them to for their voice.
And I just wanted to share, I added this green. You should be able to see right now, those are the names and school districts. So you can see in your own home counties where you represent where they are coming from and where they are representing. So really good representation, and I'm very excited to work with this group, as is all of Team KDE this year.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Karen and Tony. And for me, student voice is the love language. I remember when I was superintendent, the days that I had my student voice team advisory group were some of the best days of the entire school year. So really excited about the effort, and everyone's beginning to think about students at the table from the very start. So that's an exciting turn of events as well. At this time, I think we go to Kelly Foster, Dr. Kelly Foster and her team around reopening school.
Good morning. How are you all today?
Well, Kelly, thanks.
I have some of the same information to share that Kevin has touched on, and Karen, but just to kind of give you an update of where we are, we've released 17 guidance documents to local districts. We have 2 additional documents that will be coming out next week. Karen also touched on the weekly webcast that we're doing. We are continuing to meet with superintendents every Tuesday. And then on Mondays, we rotate either the Superintendent's Advisory Council or the task force. One of, I think, our most recent successes was the town hall that we hosted virtually for teachers, and had over 3,000 participants in that town hall, and received lots of good questions and have provided feedback to those questions through the document that Tony, the FAQ that she referenced. I did want to share a little bit of new information. We sent a survey out last week, or really just an email. It wasn't a full survey, to all our NTI contacts. Each district has a NTI contact that David Cook works directly with. And we asked the districts, how are you planning on opening? And so as of this morning, we have 144 responses coming in from our districts. And 75% of them are saying that they are going to be opening in a blended model, which would be some in-person classes and some virtual learning based on parent choice. And so that's 109 districts that are doing a parent choice, either face-to-face and blended. We have 18%, which is 26 districts, that they are saying they are starting with full 100% NTI virtual. And then we have 9 districts that are going to do like an AB model, or a hybrid approach, alternating schedules. So that's just kind of a little update of what we're hearing from our districts as far as how they're opening their doors. And I also just want to once again talk about our relationship with public health. We are meeting with them regularly Robin Kinney and Kay Kennedy and Angie McDonald and I meet with them once a week. And then they've been a great support in joining our superintendent's webcast, our task force meetings, and our superintendent advisory meetings. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Robin, and she's going to talk a little bit more about our partnership with public health and some of the concerns that we're hearing from our local districts. And then I'll be glad to take any questions.
Thank you, Kelly, and it is a pleasure to be online with you again this morning. First, I really want to thank our professionals at the Department for Public Health for all the support that they've shown us. A special thanks to Dr. Stack, Dr. Connie White, Dr. Emily Messerly, and really all the Department for Public Health staff. I feel like in many regards, we've been in a boots on the ground professional development for the last 3 months with public health. We have learned so much from them as we've partnered, and I think they've learned a lot about our world of education, which has been mutually beneficial to both of us. I think by the end of the day, Dr. Connie White and Interim Commissioner Brown probably will get respective doctorates in their areas because they've really been able to talk the talk very fluently on either side. So we're really fortunate. As Kelly and others have stated, they have been dedicated to the department and to our public schools from the perspective that they join us for every education continuation task force meeting, our superintendent advisory meetings, and our every Tuesday superintendent webcast. It's really shows the dedication of their time toward our efforts. And as we meet with them, what we do on our Thursday call, which is a smaller work group, as Kelly mentioned, we really try to share what we have learned throughout the week. So we are constantly looking at what other states are doing. We are constantly trying to keep up with what the CDC is putting out to see if we need to make any changes to guidance that we've already offered. And it's also had us look to other partners within state government and across other educational areas. So we've pulled in discussions from our state fire marshal's office, very important when we're talking about buildings and we're reopening. We've talked with the early childhood folks. You know, childcare is a really, really important issue that's still a challenge facing parents and families and our school districts, teachers, administrators. So we've reached out to those early childhood folks. The Kentucky Center for School Safety and our school safety marshal also have been engaged in our discussions. Our education system touches so much that we really have to reach out to these partners to kind of resolve any inconsistencies or conflicts across the guidance. I will share with you that some of the things that are coming out of those discussions, even though we continue to emphasize and get lots of questions on the expectations to reopen school, what are the minimums that schools need to comply with, and then what are guidance. Some of the issues that are bubbling up through public health are the use of plexiglass in our schools and whether that's a substitute. And we caution districts, we tell them that's not a substitute for mask and social distancing, but it could just be another layer, an additional layer of protections for students and staff. Ventilation is something that's really popping up now. Trying to learn about ventilation in our school buildings, knowing that all of our school buildings aren't of the same age or not the same structure or abilities. So that's something that we are continuing to explore. And then, of course, mask and social distancing and the nuances of that. You know, it's one thing to say social distancing. What does that look like in a classroom? What does that look like in your gymnasium or your lunchroom? So really drilling down to those. KDE has also continued, in addition to our guidance that we've shared with you. You know, we have a lot of people in our school districts that are, I would say, specialists at what they do. And that's both from the instructional side as well as the logistics side. So in addition to the webcasts that we've already mentioned, there are various other webcasts that are being conducted very regularly with those more specialized teams. So, for example, our special ed directors, they're having their own special webcasts. David Couch is meeting frequently with the technology staff in districts. ER staff and Title I coordinators are also getting specific information for them. And then also all of our logistics team in school districts, Think about your facilities directors, your people transportation directors, food service directors, DPPs, finance officers. All of those folks, what they're interested in is, what box do I put the code in? Where does the number go? How do I survive once a review or an audit or additional questions come later? They really want to do the right thing with fidelity, and they're anxious at this time to make sure that they're doing the right thing. So lots of the offices, in addition to my office, are having those separate webcasts on a very regular basis with those folks to drill down into the more logistical questions. And around those logistical questions, you've already talked this morning about some of the things they're asking. The leave time. How do they wade through those nuances of leave time for their staff, whether they're talking about federal leave time or flexibility offered by the state or local board policies. They're also very interested in the logistics of safety and cleaning, down to what is the material I should use to make sure that my school is safe. How does a meal service look this time with the challenges of the coronavirus? And then finally, the logistics around contact tracing. What's it really going to look like? Because we know it is inevitable that we will have some diagnosis within our schools. So what does that look like, and how can we feel assured and communicate to our parents and family that we know once that happens, what will happen logistically? As Kelly mentioned, the district plans are still evolving, and we still encourage districts to stay very nimble, to pivot based upon the closer we get to school and then once school has started. And KDE, with your help as the Board of Education, will continue, once operations start, to continue to examine additional flexibilities that will be needed. As soon as school starts, we'll start thinking about all those things during the school year that we typically do, that now we need to do a different way. So we'll be coming back to you as we work with our schools and districts to give them the most flexibility possible. I've tried to give you just a little bit of the additional information that we're working with at KDE with our partners across the Commonwealth as we support our local school districts. But I'll be happy to take any questions.
All right, thank you. Board members, before we turn our attention to KSB, KSD, and our area technology centers, I know several of you have had questions on and off over the course of the summer. So while we have Kelly and Robin and Kevin available, please feel free to unmute and ask those questions.
One question, this is Sharon Robinson. One question I have concerns the availability of materials that the schools are going to use. We are hearing that everything is in such short supply, from cleaning materials to masks and PPE, protective equipment for teachers. Are schools feeling more confident that they have access to those materials now, or what's their worry in that regard?
That's a good question. I think different districts, and depending on where you're located, may be feeling the impact of that a little bit differently. What the department has done, school districts can purchase off of statewide master agreements that are offered through the Commonwealth of Kentucky. And so if you're out on our COVID-19 website, you'll see that we've prominently posted, for the convenience of our districts, a location that they can click right off that page to see state master agreements that they can access. And districts, of course, also use, lots of them use their educational cooperative as partner for purchasing. So we know that they are actively searching for that PPE as well. And I think we'll continue to hear different sectors or different areas of the Commonwealth, and based upon demand and supply, we might go through kind of ups and downs on when things are available. It's important that they continue to monitor and reach out to those vendors very frequently, because as they ramp up on their supply, it will be available again. You just kind of got to be first on the spot in order to reach out and grab it when it's available. But I'm not hearing a lot personally from districts that they're having that concern right now.
This is Patrice McCrary, And I have a question and a concern. I am hearing from across the Commonwealth, several kindergarten teachers have reached out. Of course, they're in a different situation because their students are not required to wear masks, but they are encouraged to socially distance. Because of the situation we're facing as far as staffing goes and the like, there are some classes that are already up to 30 kindergarten students in a classroom. There is zero ability to space those children out and socially distance. I know that the preschool classes have certain guidelines on how many students can be in a classroom under the circumstances. Is there any consideration of doing that same source or that same guideline for kindergarten classrooms, since there will be no mask possibly on the students?
I'm going to let Kelly kind of take the class size question, but if I'll start off with the mask question about kindergarten students. You know, as we started rolling out the initial guidance about mask wearing and trying to figure out where the best place to draw that line, we probably heard equal amounts from districts about it will be very difficult to have kindergartners wearing masks, so please don't make them wear masks. And then we also heard the concerns about the staff and if they were kindergarten teachers. So we heard both of those. And we were also trying to find because we talk about first grade and older, we were hearing some concerns about where those ages of students might fall as it relates to kindergarten and first grade. So we were trying not to tie it to a age, we were rather trying to tie it to a grade. I've had a lot of questions from districts about having their kindergartners wearing masks. And I think what we always remind them is the expectation is a minimum expectation for our kindergarten students or younger. If districts would like to say that, go above that and say kindergartners need to wear masks, they are certainly permitted to do that as an extra layer of protection for both their kindergartners and their staff. But we did that line at the kindergarten from a practicality of, can you really have those masks on those kindergartners and can they really appreciate that? So I think districts can take that local decision to do it more than that if they want to. And we've had a lot of questions about that. So it will be interesting to see how many local school districts do impose that as additional layer protection. Kelly, can I turn to you on the class size question?
Sure. I actually talked a little bit about class size this week during our superintendent's webcast, and our official guidance document on that will be coming out Monday. And we will actually be highlighting that on the webcast on Tuesday. But just so you all will be aware, we're trying to keep that as simple as possible. And basically the guidance is built around two things. Are you a school that has a site-based council? Or are you a school and or program that does not have a site-based council? And so if you do have a site-based and you need to make some adjustments around class size, your local site-based council can look at their policies, amend those policies. So that's pretty simple for the majority of the A1 schools out there across the state. We do have a handful of A1 schools that do not have site-based councils. They tend to be like a K-12 school. And then we have some alternative programs, which are not schools, they are programs, and they are labeled in the system as an A5 program. And so they would not have a council. And so there is some guidance around how you get an exemption if you are a non-site-based school or an A5 program, and they will just reach out to me, and there's a form that they're going to complete to receive an exemption on class size during COVID-19. But that official information is coming out on Monday and will be highlighted next Tuesday.
Patrice McCreary here again. I don't want a spoiler alert or anything going out about what's going to be released this coming week, but I would love to know an answer on, will there be guidelines on a specific number in the kindergarten classes like in the preschool classes, if that's possible?
The guidance is about, waiving if you need to have additional students in your class. But no, we're not doing any type of specific, you can have up to this number in this class or anything like that. It's just what process you need to take if you need to amend your policy currently around class size.
I think that we are going to find the same thing going on in schools that we find at the KDE level, and it runs into money. It runs into the budget, and you can only spread that budget so far to make the class size smaller. I'm in major hopes that we are going to see some relief in those areas, because as a former kindergarten teacher, I cannot imagine trying to socially distance 30 children in a kindergarten classroom during a pandemic.
And we ask in the guidance documents that we ask districts, the first thing that they need to do and that they have done is you need to survey your building footprint, your square footage, other available resources that you may have, or tents that you can put up outside temporarily. That the first option is reducing that class size. But obviously when you reduce that, you either have to go to a hybrid schedule and bring only in certain kids at certain times during the week, or you have to hire additional teachers, which comes into that. And so what districts are finding, if they don't have the extra space, if they don't have the extra teacher, then yes, they can have a class full of 30, but that does raise the issues that you brought up. And I do know that public health continues to evaluate the information coming from CDC and others. We're hearing, anecdotally, we hear about the reports of additional spread in children, and that's low. It seems to be a lower and lower age as we go along, and CDC will continue, or public health will continue to monitor that, and then we will adjust the guidance based on their recommendation as necessary if we get to that point. In talking with other commissioners from around the country and some of these meetings we've had virtually, we're about in the middle on the kindergarten mask issue. Some states, about half of them that I can tell that I've talked to, have masking any student over 4 years old, which is pretty much every student in a public school. Other states have after fourth grade or above. We're at kindergarten or above kindergarten with the option of local districts doing it. It doesn't answer the concern that you have, but we're somewhere there in the middle on the decision right now, knowing that could change as we move on based on public health recommendation.
Excellent. Thank you. Yes.
This is Claire Batt, and I just wanted to maybe get a little clarification on the provisions being made in terms of flexibility for those teachers who are highly at risk. I know I've talked to a number of teachers from across the state who have very serious health issues. And there were a couple in particular who talked about, as high school teachers, they were being asked to come into the building to work rather than being allowed to work virtually from outside the building. Because they were going to have to change classes to teach virtually, they would be exposed to kids in the hallways, which is a great concern. So would you be able to talk about and just clarify some of the guidelines for the virtual work for people who fall into that category?
Sure. And Todd, and after I speak, I'm going to ask you to chime in and maybe walk us through the flow chart of the various leaves that are available and some of the legal issues, particularly if a teacher has a doctor's excuse or a doctor's warning on that teacher's ability to be in certain circumstances. We've asked districts from day one, and this is consistent, of course, and the governor led this charge with Healthy at Work at the very beginning about every employer acting in good faith, and that, and I believe by and large, our districts are acting in good faith. There may be a few outliers out there in various scenarios, but asking employers to make sure that if you have an employee that can perform their job duties by telework, then it is best that that employee be allowed to do that, because even if it's only a fraction of your employees, the fewer employees you have in an office environment or a factory environment or any other environment, we know most factory work obviously can't be done remotely, but environments that where the work can be done remotely, that you do that, because that reduces that building's capacity, that increases the odds that there will be less transmission and that type of thing. And so this was a paradigm shift for districts, because while we have been telecommuting at the department, or up to about 25% of KDE employees telecommuted a few days a week over the last 10 years or so, that just didn't happen in school districts. Obviously, when you're teaching in-person classes, just like, and I use the example on a superintendent webcast, if you're teaching in-person classes or if you're making Toyota Camrys, you can't do that remotely. You obviously have to have people present to do those two items. But there are other functions in both the corporate world and in government and education where certain employees can telework, and we want districts to recognize that. I was criticized a little bit on the last superintendent's webcast that why aren't you modeling us coming back to in-person? Well, the answer to that is we're still in a pandemic, and we're not yet being released to go to in-person classes. And I know that the department can perform its functions and has done so very well remotely. And so I'm very comfortable with the department working remotely, and we are doing a very soft open. And so we have about 25 department folks coming back as of July 15th. That will gradually increase as we get through the virus. And so we want districts to continue to view that with that lens. They need to understand their workforce. They need to continue to allow individuals in central office and other duties that can perform their duties remotely to do so, because that increases the chances that we are not going to have crowded conditions in our offices. However, there are, obviously, if they choose to go in person, or if they're doing a hybrid approach, that does require a certain amount of individuals to be in the school building every day. Well, then that bumps up against if teachers have medical conditions, and if they are having doctors' notes and orders from a doctor about whether or not they need to be in an environment with other people, that conflicts with the number of available opportunities that districts have to place a teacher teaching remotely, as opposed to the need to have some of them at least, and then if you're going full in person, everyone to be there in in-person classes. And so I think we're seeing that, and it's starting to bubble up in school districts where they are giving, and I was provided an example by a board member yesterday on text. One school district, there's several options I think that board council had about if a teacher could not teach based on a doctor's recommendation, or at least teach in person, here are the options that teacher had. And so I think that was a good faith effort on part of the school district. However, there are some ramifications if a teacher cannot do their job based on a medical condition that gets into the legal area. So, Todd, do you want to take it from there about some of the tough decisions that districts may have in dealing with that employment issue?
Commissioner Brown, I think that you adequately summarized the issue that Ms. Batt has raised. First of all, I will say I believe Commissioner Brown has done a great job of encouraging superintendents and pushing them to consider the option of telework whenever that exists. As he indicated, telework is very new to school districts. It's something that really they hadn't done before, and understanding that, how it works and how it can work to make your school district operate and folks continue to function and perform all of their required duties is a change that has been made in school districts very quickly. And we see that some of them have, very readily adopted that. As Commissioner Brown indicated, we've provided guidance out to school districts on the various leave options that exist that they can provide to their staff. However, I think the question goes more to an accommodation of telework. In school districts that are very large and have a very large teaching staff and very large student population, that's probably easier to do than in extremely small districts that have very little staff and a smaller student population. The ability to meet that accommodation request may also change based on the number of students who are reporting to the building versus learning remotely. So we have encouraged school districts that when that when they receive a request from a teacher or other staff member, receiving requests for accommodations is not new to school districts. Just as a teacher historically may have requested to teach on the first floor of the building because of some disability that either prevented or may have made difficult getting to the second floor of the building, the request to telework based on recommendations from their healthcare provider, given the global pandemic that we have, is a request for an accommodation. So when that occurs, every school district needs to take a look at the circumstances and see if they are able to make that work, given the number of students that they have remotely, the number of students that they have in person, the number of other teachers that they have that are able to come into the building, and determine whether or not that teacher or other staff member is able to perform the essential, their essential functions at home. And it may be that it's not only a telework request, there may be other certain type of accommodation requests that occur throughout the course of a day. Maybe the teacher is fine in the classroom, but they don't want to have to go into the cafeteria or go into the hallway. They prefer, based on their medical condition, to stay in one room throughout the day. School districts are going to deal with these requests probably more so in volume than they ever have, and they're going to be very individual determinations based on how the district is able to accommodate the specific needs of that teacher or other staff member.
Excellent, thank you.
This is Aldous Johnson. I want to echo what Patrice was saying earlier. I've spent most of my years teaching in a secondary school. There is absolutely no way. I had a class of maybe 35. There is no way you can separate high school, kindergarten, or there's no way you can social distance the classes that's and most schools are in a similar situation. They just are not going to be able to social distance those kids at the high school level as well as the kindergarten level, unless you just happen to be one of those schools that have really a small student population and an abundance of teachers to make it work. I mean, even if you use gymnasiums, your gym spaces and your cafeteria spaces, if you got 2,000 students in your school, that's going to be virtually impossible to social distance them.
I think that I agree with you, Mr. Johnson, but I think that just looking at these survey results, you know, we've got 109 districts that are going to do the blended, part virtual and part face-to-face. So I think probably what principals are going to try to do is, because part of their student body will be doing the virtual option, that will free up some classrooms where maybe they can do a little bit better job of social distancing. But I do think it's going to be a challenge for, you know, grades K through 12.
This is Allison. I'm sorry. Concern that some teachers have brought up to me recently, and this kind of goes along with what we're talking about here, but teachers that are having to teach in person and virtual. Is there any guidance around timelines for that in the teacher workday? Because several are being told that and feel like they may have to give of their personal time after hours to reach out to the students and work virtually. Is there anything that we can provide or have provided around that?
We've not, Todd, you may want to chime in, or Kelly, we've not provided guidance around those types of employment issues. Being the son of a teacher, I know well the many hours at night spent that are outside the workday, and I understand that concern. Kelly, am I correct in that we've not issued guidance on that? And that's an issue that also comes up in some districts, particularly districts with bargain contracts, just in a normal school year.
Yes, we have not issued guidance around that as far as what a work day looks like for a teacher that is teaching virtually. I do know that we've released guidance through Marty Park and his team around virtual options, but not what a requirement would be of a teacher. I think I'm hearing from districts are doing different things. You know, some teachers are going to have office hours, and that's when that they could provide take questions and provide remediation. And those office hours would be, sometime during the workday, but not during when they're actually doing the face-to-face, or not, excuse me, not face-to-face, but the online virtual teaching or logged into the Google Classroom. So I think we're seeing a variety of things from different districts.
This is Patrice McCreary again. My understanding is there are some teachers who are doing both. They are required to teach during the course of the day, and then they're also involved in virtual instruction. And Kevin, as you mentioned earlier, teaching during the course of the day, you come home, your day is not finished. You continue to work as a teacher on what you've done throughout the day and be prepared for the next day. We are looking at teachers now. I don't know where they're going to find the time to do that. And I have some real concerns about that. I would love to see some guidelines put in place.
Kelly, if you could make a note of that, I think this may be something beyond what we initially envisioned. If in fact districts are, and particularly if there are, because sometimes virtual instruction doesn't happen in between 7:30 a.m. and 3:30 p.m. So if we do in fact have a situation where a teacher is working a full day in person, but then there are virtual classes at night, then that is something we need to look further into. It sounds like that's what the issue could be.
Yes, I've heard of some teachers being asked to do that.
We'll definitely take a look at it.
Commissioner Brown and Dr. Foster, if I may share just a bit.
Yes, please.
Hi, okay, Mark. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, this is an extremely important topic to understand. The capacity as we develop strategies around, both in-person instruction and digital online or virtual instruction. And so, throughout the state, we have already kicked off digital learning design labs in coordination with our education cooperatives that are getting at these design conversations. We are also in the guidance that will be released on Monday. We are sharing suggestions and the research on student interaction with teachers and what that should and could look like. We understand that the class size issue is important, and so we are issuing guidance on that. But it's also important to understand that when our teachers have more students than they can handle, then the number of interactions between students and teachers in terms of learning will decrease. And so it's important for all of us as we implement these new strategies that we understand how to make sure that that's successful as we move forward.
Thank you. All right. Other questions? Thank you so much, Kevin and team. I know that I'm sorry, I heard someone.
Yeah, Chair Young, I also wanted to provide a little bit additional clarification on Coach Johnson's question. There was some social media post on a school in Georgia, it may have been Paulding County, open in-person classes this week, and that picture looked like it was could have been taken last year. I didn't see a mask, and Georgia doesn't have mandatory masking, so that's part of the problem. We have mandatory masking. We know as days go by, anecdotally, I use the Dollar General store here in Garrett County as an example. I'm seeing more people adhere to masking, and I think that's good for our students as they see that, because when we do eventually get to in-person classes, that's good. So we have that on our side. I don't want to discount, though, Coach Johnson. We obviously know we're dealing with students, and we know that students don't always follow the directives, and we know that occurs, and it will occur. Public health, we had a lot of conversation over the summer with them about these very issues based on superintendent feedback. Public health acknowledges, and our guidance document acknowledges, there will be many times during the school day where you're not exhibiting the 6-foot social distancing. But the important thing is, and we've used this slogan, is if you're moving, you need to be if you're moving, you mask. And so anytime you move in a school building, in a hallway, you need to have your mask on. You need to always try to practice social distancing, knowing that's not always achievable in a hallway that was built in for non-pandemic times. And so that mask is a layer of protection that public health was comfortable with. If a classroom is able to have the 6 feet social distancing in that classroom, we know that's obviously a reduction of capacity from normal times. There will be some of those that are able to achieve that. Just due to the class enrollment, or maybe they have a larger building than other districts, then that mask can come down in that limited period if they are 6 feet apart and they're not moving. And so the other thing we have is that we know that the governor and the administration, they are committed to not giving the green light or the caution light to districts for in-person classes until the number of cases starts going down and plateauing, and the other metric there is the positivity rate of being above 5%. Those things, that's what's been going on over the last few weeks, causing concern, is why the governor issued the strong recommendation, which has been followed by every school district, not to have in-person classes before August 17th. The governor is using this period right now up until mid-August to see if the mitigation strategies are working, if mandatory masking is working, if the not having closing bars is reducing restaurant capacity, urging people not to travel to hot spots, if that works. And then the governor will obviously make the recommendation, yes or no, whether or not there needs to be an additional few weeks or days to not. So we have that gating criteria at a statewide level is what I'm saying. So that's another added layer of protection, that we're not going to be sending a message to districts that it's okay to go back to in-person classes until we have some level of positive case results and that positivity rate going down at the state level. And that's obviously, we all heard the governor say that in the last few evening press conferences. So I just want to give that context. Again, Coach Johnson, that doesn't alleviate. You nailed it. There are going to be problems. Even the school that tries to do the best with the kids that are adhering, there are going to be issues. Of course, there will be. But I believe we're a little bit better situated than some other states that I use as an example because of those measures that public health and the governor put in place.
Thank you. Thank you so much. At this time, I will ask Associate Commissioner Greta Hilton to update us more specifically on the reopening of the Kentucky School for the Deaf and the Kentucky School for the Blind.
Hi, thank you, Chair Young, and good morning. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. So the conversation that we were just having is timely and is the same conversations that we're having at Kentucky School for the Blind and Kentucky School for the Deaf. But first, let me start with a few positive announcements that we're really excited about. We had a little bit of turnover over the summer in some of our leadership positions at the School for the Blind and School for the Deaf. And so I'm excited to say that we have filled these positions. Carol Ann Morrison is the new director for the Division of State Schools. And you know Carol Ann previously from her role as interim policy advisor in the Office of Special Education and Early Learning. So she's not new to the department, she's new to the role. Peggy Sinclair Morris, we may have already announced her as the new principal for KSB. She has been at KSB for a number of years and left recently to work with the Kentucky Deaf Blind Project. She's got an extensive background in working with individuals who are blind or deaf blind. And then most recently, we have hired a new director of special education. Jane Painter is coming to us from Boyle County, and she actually begins on August 16th. And we're excited to have Jane. She's an experienced director of special education, and we apologize to Boyle County for stealing one of their best, but we're excited to have her. So all that to say, as you can imagine, we are working with schools to quickly transition to NTI. They have worked extensively with local health departments in Danville and Louisville areas, as well as the Department for Public Health. They've been great about jumping on phone calls with principals and my team to look further into some of the challenges that we have, because we do have students coming from all areas of the state to residential as well as day services at the school. So it makes things a little bit more complicated because we aren't looking at just what's going on in a particular region necessarily, but what's happening across the state. And because of the advice from local health departments, the principals and staff decided that NTI was the best option for our students. But obviously that brings some challenges that you were just discussing that we're trying to work through. Currently, folks are working on these NTI plans. We are developing some plans to get materials out to students. And again, this is somewhat challenging for us simply because we have to deliver these across the state. So we are developing those plans, working with families, determining what students lack internet access, and trying to work with some other offices within KDE and families to ensure that they have hotspots or any other technology needed. And as you know, our students have needs that range from low technology devices, right, to just the regular day-to-day materials that we need to get out to them, as all the way up to assistive technology devices that can help them access the curriculum. We are also working with folks in community and school nutrition to determine how to best get our students provided with meals this year. We know through NTI that that's going to be a challenge for KSB and KSD because we can't necessarily set up locations because the travel distance is such a barrier. So we are hoping to collaborate with some local school districts and work through some of the barriers that may be presenting themselves to ensure that our students do have access to meals. A huge shout out again, I've said this before and I'll say it again, local school districts last year were just incredible about stepping up and helping us ensure that our students receive those meals just like students who were enrolled in those local school districts. We are also, as we're moving toward this 6 weeks of NTI, we are looking at the additional trainings and seizing this opportunity for many of our classified staff to move forward with certain trainings and professional development opportunities that they wouldn't have otherwise had time to do because they would have been involved in supervising students and or providing extracurricular things for the evening. So it's a really good time for us to provide those job-specific professional development opportunities for these folks, as well as improved cleaning and access to PPE and all of those things virus related that we know we're going to have challenges with when we reopen. And so those are some high level things that are happening in the school. Carol Ann Morrison is actually with us, and I think she may have a few things that she would like to share since she's actually been already on campus and has been working closely with the principals this week. So I'll turn it over and let Carol Ann say a few words.
Thank you, Greta. She covered a lot of what I was going to share with you, so I appreciate that. I will say that one thing that schools are working on right now is that they utilize surveys for both families and staff to determine their needs. And so they are working on survey results from parents at Kentucky School for the Blind revealed that parents were really concerned with all of the different platforms that were used in the spring. They really struggled to understand the different platforms. And so they are working to have one consistent platform for instruction that they will utilize for NTI this fall. So they're working on that right now. At KSD, one of the big things that came out of the staff survey is that the staff's greatest need is for resources for virtual instruction. And so we are working right now to help provide them with additional resources they can use for virtual instruction. And also, they're working on plans for providing support for parents. So they know that the virtual environment may be difficult for some parents, or they may have questions about how to access the resources and how to assist their students at home. So each school is kind of working on their own plans for helping to support parents. One school has the idea of like a virtual 101 class or meeting that they would offer, and that parents could attend that meeting, or then they could record it and watch it later. And so both schools are working on that right now to make sure that parents feel comfortable with helping assist their students while they are at home. And I think that covers pretty much everything I wanted to share with you, but of course, we would welcome any questions you may have.
All right. Thank you, Carol Ann and Greta, and for everything you're doing to ensure that our students at the School for the Blind and the School for the Deaf have a safe return, hopefully in a matter of just weeks. At this time, I think it is to David Horseman regarding our reopening of our area technology centers.
Good morning, and thank you, Chair. I'd like to begin by sharing some information that recently in the budget language, there was an opportunity for our area technology centers to transition to local operation. And we have been in the process working with 2 districts to do that this summer. And that has just been approved, and the Nelson County ATC and the Greene County ATCs are now under local control of those districts, along with interlocal agreements with their feeder districts to continue the access to their students. So at this point now, we're at 51 area technology centers. On the reopening, I'd just like to thank the governor and lieutenant governor's office, JCPS, Dr. Thompson at CPE, and Kia for working with KDE this summer to reopen the CTE labs for our seniors to complete their dual credit and industry recognized certifications. So I would like to, we've made some updates on that for the reopening of the fall, and Mr. Tom Thompson, our Director of Technical Schools, is here to update you in a little more detail of our fall reopening. Tom?
Thank you, David. Thank you, Chair Young. Thank you, Board of Education. So if you might, do you mind changing the slide, please? So as David said, we worked during the summer with KCTCS and the governor's office and a small work group of CTE and ATC principal, or CTC and ATC principals, to create a guidance document for them for reopening the secondary CTE spaces for industry certification and dual credit to complete that lab-based work. That guidance leans heavily on the Healthy at Work guidance, and now we're starting to shift from that summer guidance into the fall, but we're still asking schools or ATCs to lean back on this document along with the flagship document, and to work closely with their school districts to make sure. And as you know, if we've got over 50 area technology centers, and each one is unique in that they may have one feeder district, and so they act more like just another school on campus for that district, or we may have 5 or 6 feeder districts that feed into that. And it is imperative that our principals sit down with those superintendents and those leadership folks to have those conversations about reopening, so that we are in alignment with them. So not any one ATC is going to be the same, and at our level, we can't really give them this overarching mandate of how they should operate. So that's kind of where we've gone into that. Back to the summer guidance and some of the guidance that they're using. On the next slide, there is that guidance is broken down into 4 particular areas: general requirements, arrival and dismissal, transition between classrooms and labs, and the area-specific guidance for classrooms, lab, computer labs, and then CTE lab areas. Again, it's really general guidance in that those folks are going to be working with those district folks and their local health departments to make those decisions. Next slide, please. Thank you. So again, we're asking our principals to make sure that they're working closely with those folks. We've had every ATC designate a Healthy at School leader. These folks, we're asking it to be on those other teams, those other Healthy at School teams with the local districts. Now, if they have 5 or 6 feeders, that may not be appropriate, but we do ask that major sending district, at least that one, and then if they can multiples, that would be appropriate too. And then any information that we gather from that, we'll share with those other feeders to make sure that we're all on the same page. Again, we're leaning heavily on the June 29th guidance and the flagship document that Katie has produced, along with those other documents as needed. ATC leadership, last week we had our summer virtual conference of sorts, and we had 2 meetings. One of them lasted all day long, different things, and basically the regular work of school. And then we had COVID sections of it that is this additional piece that we try to get concerns from. And since they are all different, that was more of a question and answer session. And we've taken those concerns and with our policy advisor, Leslie Slaughter, and Ashley Lant, and through our HR department, we've been working to answer those questions that are specific to those schools and to those concerns of those folks in those schools. We do have 3 field supervisors that oversee anywhere between 16 and 18 schools. They have been meeting with them, and if I can get in there, I'll try to meet with them too for concerns that are narrowed down to that level, I guess. And then anything that arises, it comes back up through the ranks, and we try to answer if they can't answer it. And then right now, I guess the biggest concern that we have right now is remote learning professional development needs, technology and equipment needs that we're working on through some of the funding sources that we have available to us, and then any personnel concerns we're dealing with individually with those students. And then one thing that I'd like to point out that I think is really cool that's starting to happen is we have been getting our ATC principals together to start professional learning communities based on program areas. So instead of one teacher having to come up with original virtual plans, then we have program specific folks together working as a group to come up with those professional development or those instructional plans and resources and ideas so that they're bouncing things off of each other. We also have our program area consultants working on that. And then we're currently building a team to work on some virtual platforms for one of our other projects. OSHA 10, for example, we're building a virtual program to continue to offer that to students, even if it's not in person. So with that said, if you don't have any questions, I'll try to entertain those at this point.
So Tom, I may have missed this, but if we go back to ATC, if and when we go back to ATC in person and a student is in a school district, in a feeder school district where they are not yet in person, what options does the student have? I guess it's the same question I would have about dual credit in other places where our students go during the day, where you might find a conflict between face-to-face and virtual.
Well, and we do have that right now. We have that conflict between that. And if the sending district is completely virtual, then that student will have a virtual option with us. Now, obviously, you can teach welding theory. You can't teach welding practice, the hands-on portion of it. So if everyone involved, if the feeder district, the sending district, the parents and the students are, not opposed to bringing them in, and we do have the resources and the social distancing availability, then we will be able to do that. And I think we heard earlier, flexibility is key here. And I think we have to be flexible enough. But the one thing that I don't want to do is I don't want to say, well, just because it's a hands-on course, we're not going to accept you into this course, or we're not going to try our best to make every reasonable accommodation to make that happen, because we can teach that theory, but if something comes up later on down the road where we can get them in person and we haven't taught that theory, then we can't teach them the hands-on. So we are going to try our best to use some of the resources that we have to try to make some hands-on type kits, or they can buy some instructional kits. Electronics kits are already out there, but those types of resources to where we can get a little bit of hands-on stuff and some virtual reality kind of stuff. Say, for example, Tooling U for manufacturing programs has some specific modules and things built in it to where they can program like on a CNC milling machine, a computer controlled milling machine, and see it operate within that software or within that package. So if we can get those types of things, that'll help supplement it. But I mean, that's not going to be the answer, but I don't know that we have a solid answer other than to be completely in person.
And a lot of those software packages, the more technical ones, don't run on something as simple as a Chromebook, which many of the students have access to.
Yes, and we've actually considered that within some of the funding sources that we're looking at, and we're right now just working on that. But some districts do have one-to-one capabilities, but when they say one-to-one, it could possibly be that it is a Chromebook. So we're working on those specific programs like CAD/CAM programs or CAD programs themselves that would need them once we know the true need for those that the district is not supporting, then we're going to try to supplement that with the funding that we have available.
Thank you.
Lou, this is Mike Bowling.
Thanks, Mike.
If you would, I'm going to ask to be excused, okay?
Oh, yes, thank you so much, Mike, and we'll note that you had to step away at 11:40.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Board members, any questions for Carol Ann, Tom, David, or Greta? All right, thank you so much. We appreciate you, and we know these are our schools, and we appreciate all that you guys are doing to reopen them safely, along with our superintendents in the 171 school districts.
Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, we'll turn our attention to Superintendent Dr. Marty Polio from Jefferson County Schools. And Marty, you may still be muted.
Dr. Foster, I'm not sure that I see Dr. Polio on. Is he available? I know we're running just a few minutes ahead.
I'm texting him right now.
Okay.
So we never get a break, Jennifer. So how about we take a 5-minute recess, let folks get a drink of water, and then we will start back again at 11:46. And hopefully Dr. Polio will be ready. If not, we'll move ahead to the next item on our agenda.
Sounds great.
Thank you.
Okay, Chair Young, you're good to go.
Thank you so much. And the next item we are back after a brief recess at 11:46. The next item on our agenda is an update from Jefferson County Public Schools. So I'll turn it over to Superintendent Dr. Marty Polio.
Thank you, Chair Young and board members. Honored to be back here with you again. And first off, I want to congratulate Commissioner Brown for his award he received at the KASA conference last week as an Innovator Educator of the Year. For very much deserved. We were very proud here in JCPS. We know he's with the state right now, but in JCPS, it was we took a little bit of credit for that too, because he's one of us. So congratulations, Commissioner Brown. Can't wait to have you back. So I just wanted to say that. So once again, happy to be here with you again today to talk about the progress of JCPS and our final corrective action plan. As you know, we all know it's a very challenging time right now. So, you know, in conjunction with completing this corrective action plan and getting towards the end of the road on this over the past 18 months, as you well know, we're dealing with the pandemic like every other district in the Commonwealth and the nation, trying to figure out how we return to school and support our kids. And in the meantime, making changes to what we've been calling our future state, which is major changes to JCPS that are going to change outcomes for kids. So we have a lot going on right now, pushing everyone hard here to be different and better over the past couple years. And we think we're making great progress, but we know also that this pandemic, you know, is tough on everybody. And I'll touch on that a little bit as we get towards the end. So as we go to the next slide, you will see our agenda here today. I'm not going to cover everything on this PowerPoint. We put more information in here for you than we have that I need to talk about, so you can check that. But today we're going to be covering career and technical education, which was one of the 10 areas, and instructional management. I'm proud of the progress we've made on both of these. I think we're a leader in both of these areas. And then finally, I'll update you on the opening of JCPS schools that everyone is talking about right now, whether it's JCPS or any of the other counties across the Commonwealth or across this nation that we're all struggling with. Next slide, please. As you can see, this is the 11th time I've presented to the Kentucky Board of Education since December of 2018. Actually, I did an entry one before that in October of 2018, so officially 12 times. You can see each of the times, as you all know, since I've presented to you over the past 2 or 3 meetings, that I cover 2 of the 10 areas each time, give you an overall picture. And so now we are back to the 3rd review for CTE, Career and Technical Education, and Instructional Management. Next slide, please. Happy to report that in collaboration with KDE, Kentucky Department of Education, we have now moved to 100% of our 276 items that have been identified as correctable items, action items that we need to take in JCPS from nearly 2 years ago. We are at established on 100% of those items. Last time I reported to you, it was in the mid-90s, so we are proud of this work. Essentially what this means in each of these items, we are establishing systems in order to support and train folks from all over the district, that we have systems of oversight. So that doesn't mean that there might not be a mistake over 155 schools throughout this, or that it's perfect every single time in all of these actions. But what it does mean is that we're training for it, we're supporting for it, and we have a system of oversight. So if an error happens, we are able to correct it immediately and then move forward. So proud of this work. I can tell you the policies and procedures and training and support that's gone into this over the past 18 months has been monumental. And I say this often, most districts that were faced with this back in August of 2018 and into October, this would be the only thing that the district would take on over 2 years, because fixing 276 items over 155 schools is a huge task. But we also knew that we had to make substantial improvements in many other areas, especially instructional system-wide, to make major changes. And we're doing that and have done that. So we're taking on a great deal of things in the process. Next slide. So today we're going to talk a little bit about career and tech ed. We've had some challenges in this, really around data accuracy, building capacity in school staff about what career and tech ed means and the communication of that, and then really integrating those academic opportunities with core academics, specifically reading and math, into career and tech ed. And I can say without a doubt, with the career and tech ed, I believe JCPS is a leader not only in the state now, but across the nation in our academies of Louisville work. Unfortunately, I mean, we were seen, and when we want to talk about the impact of this work and how we see impact on improvement, it has been very evident in the academies of Louisville work. And so I haven't had the chance to talk to you about the academies of Louisville work, but it's essentially taking 15 of our high schools that are resides high schools, having wall-to-wall pathways, career pathways that are career and tech ed in every single school. So a student walks in as a freshman, they get an exploratory model as a freshman, then they pick a career academy and a specific pathway. Those pathways could be in IT, they could be in medicine, nursing, and health, they could be in manufacturing, welding, engineering, and a host of others. We have things like culinary, and some we have automotive repair, but they are all pathways where students are in wall-to-wall academies, and then they take their math, English, science, and social studies classes in cohorts together. And the power of it is each of these academies have business partners. And so our students are on a 4-year pathway that lead to a certification, articulated college credit hours, or an opportunity or a learning job embedded opportunity or experience, like an apprenticeship, that leads to transition readiness. And so our academies of Louisville model, I believe, is when we first started this work, we were looking to Nashville schools as the model. And I think we have exceeded them in that work. And we now have people coming to visit us to see the work that we are doing around the academies of Louisville. And so very proud of this work, where we are now a national model in career and tech ed. Next slide, please. And so I just want you to see just the power of this model. And this is transition readiness that goes on the school report card. So at the end of the year 17-18, 49.8% of our students were considered transition ready. And then we track it throughout the year. So in the winter of 18, right at mid-year, we were 37.9%. And then we ended the year last year at 53%. So you can see that in the winter of 19, this past December, we had already eclipsed end of year data. So that was before certification assessments were even given. And so by having kids in the wall-to-wall academy, our estimated that we believe that if we had been in school and if we had completed school, we would have eclipsed 70% transition readiness and been closing in on 75% transition readiness of our graduating seniors. But I mean, I think you can see the power that we had already surpassed our transition readiness for the end of the year 18-19 by mid-year of winter 2019. This COVID-19 has really thrown a wrench in this process for us. We're not going to let it stop us in the academies of Louisville. But when we talk about impact of this work, I mean, this is clearly the impact that we believe once we get 4 years in, kids have now gone through 4 years of wall-to-wall academy, we believe we'll be in the 85% transition readiness. And clearly our goal will be to be 100%. And this is an impact that is very clear for us. So we're proud of that. We hated that we weren't able to get that end of year data based upon certifications, ACT tests, all of those things. But we know this is significantly trending in the right direction, and it is clearly a model for business community partnerships with schools. Next slide, please. So summary of evidence, we've got to make sure that TED's data system is correct. We're really pleased with our collaboration with KDE on this work. This has been true collaboration talked about our transition readiness. We're continuing to see all-time highs in our graduation rates. So at 82%, we'll continue. I believe the academies of Louisville will continue to grow that. Post-secondary opportunities, this is a part of the academies of Louisville. So 33,275 students took early post-secondary learning courses where they would get those opportunities for college, and 1,515 took dual credit, earning nearly 7,000 college credit hours. So we're really being innovative about getting our kids out of our buildings too and onto college campuses or into apprenticeships for learning opportunities. We're process mapping our CTE related processes and protocols for all staff, which is a part of this. And then I've talked about the academies of Louisville. We're having planning meetings with 100 business partners. I mean, imagine that 100 business partners are planning with us. And then we had one school for the first time get NCAC Academy status, which is a huge task and lift. But Wagner High School has done that with their freshman academy, and we'll continue to show our academy model and how successful it is. So that's really the work around CTE that we're very proud of. Next slide, please. So the second one is instructional management. I haven't had the time or been with this board on this, but I'm very proud of this work too. The audit identified in the spring of 2017 that JCPS really had no district-wide instructional mission or vision for the entire district of 155 schools. And these are my words, not the audits, but that essentially JCPS was a district of schools and not a school district. And we needed to have systems across all 155 schools, whether it's elementary, middle, or high, things that we believe in, that you could see in every single school, but still the school culture could mold those systems based on whatever that culture at the school is. And that's truly the work that we have to do, but also have ways that we measure impact of this work across all schools. We know who's doing it well, and we monitor that, and we make adjustments along the way. And so that's where you see develop training and monitoring systems and increase accountability. We were proud a year and a half ago when we got our accreditation visit, and they said that from our last one that they see that we now are focused on systems work, and we just have to get that deeply embedded in all of our schools and continue that training. So we are focusing on our 3 pillars. You can see those. Every single school works on these 3 pillars. Our backpack of success skills, which is really around that deeper learning for students, an authentic type of learning, racial equity in every single school and every single department in JCPS, as I know the board that I'm speaking to is committed to as well, and then improving culture and climate at every school. And then our 6 systems are the 6 instructional systems that we need to see in every single school, from focusing on and deconstructing standards and having a standards-based approach to our PLC work, to coaching and feedback of teachers, to providing interventions based on those. So those systems work have to be built and developed in every single school. And then really making sure that we focus on data and having data reviews. Every school, every department, we've had an intentional work view of data, which is once again around, are we having impact? Because we can do all of these things, but if we don't measure progress, like I just showed you before, we won't be successful. And then administering MAP 3 times a year. Prior to this, the district had no universal screener to say, how are we doing? Are we monitoring reading and math? Where are students in schools when it comes to achievement and growth? And are we making progress? And then acting on that. And that's what we do with MAP for fall, winter, and spring. And we will be providing MAP to our students virtually as we come back to school. Next slide, please. So this gives you a little bit about the impact that we measure. So unfortunately, you don't see the spring bar, and when we look at MAP, because we were unable to get that. But when we look at winter 18 to winter 19, what we are measuring are students meeting the benchmarks. It was improvement, but we believe with systems work, those bars will continue to grow exponentially. We know COVID's going to have a major impact on this. We can't shy away from that. And that's where our systems work will be so important. And then having growth above the 50th percentile. And so when the growth is at the 50th percentile, that means students are meeting 1 year of growth in one academic year. And to catch up, we've really got to increase that growth. And that's what we're starting to see. So really, this is measuring that impact through MAP. And this is what we measure with schools, amongst others. But MAP is so critical. Next slide, please. So a few things about instructional management. So we're looking at the percent of students meeting grade level benchmarks and seeing that grow. We're looking at things like how many are we identifying gifted and talented. And so over 2,000 more gifted and talented identification of students of color this past year. That's going to have a significant impact. And so, those are the steps we have to take. We've developed a teacher backpack, which is where teachers go to deconstruct standards and get supports, and a principal backpack. And I wanted to spend just a moment on what we call our comprehensive systems review. And so what we look to, which was not evident in JCPS, that was in some other major districts across America, like New York City, Baltimore, and some other districts, was an internal way for the district to take a team in and provide an audit, so to speak, an internal audit of the systems, instructional systems within a school, spend a couple of days talking to stakeholders within that school, viewing classrooms, PLCs, and all the work, looking at data, and then giving a comprehensive review of the school's instructional systems so that they can then work together to improve those. We give every single school, all 155 schools, a comprehensive system review every other year. And then we do formative reviews for every school in the fall and the winter. So those are more like a multiple hour where we speak to the leadership team and we give them feedback where they are doing on system reviews. I think this is an innovative approach that will be a national model, where we can really say, this is how we're measuring how our schools are doing, not necessarily depending on external audits, but we are doing it ourselves. And that is really measuring that impact of learning and how we're making a difference. So that's so critical. And then NTI during the summer, just to give you, some of the work we've done on instructional management. We've served over 1.7 million meals, up to 1.8 now. We've already distributed 20,000 devices. We're going to distribute at least 30,000 more. We were very proud of our numbers when it came to participation in NTI in the spring. We know we're going to increase that benchmark of what we expect. But compared to other districts, our teachers and schools did an amazing job. Over 4,700 ARC meetings scheduled. And we've had over 6,000 students participating in virtual summer learning opportunities this summer. And I do want to say, secondarily, about a year ago, we brought an entire team together and created what we called a future state, which means what do we have to change? So we're doing a lot of the work around systems in schools, but foundationally, what do we have to change in JCPS? And we have found about 6 different areas where we are focusing on. And many are a part of this corrective action plan, but they, from facilities to student assignment, to teacher and administrator development, and how we increase that capacity, to our supports around systems for kids, to increasing learning time for students. And so we have taken, in the midst of all of this corrective action plan, a very assertive approach to making significant change in schools in JCPS, but also the foundations of how we do things. And I know you've seen many of that in the news over the past couple of months as we continue to not only worry about the corrective action plan and not only worry about getting us back in school, but also making major changes fundamentally to the way we do things in JCPS. Next slide, please. So finally, I'll talk briefly about us opening of school. I wanted to update this because I know this is a topic everyone is talking about. We put a team together, a pandemic response team, late April, early May, and we were like everyone else. We felt that there was going to be a significant decrease in cases of COVID-19 over the summer. We would be able to get back to school. And we also had a committee working on what we call NTI 2.0, because we were anticipating a second spike of cases in the late fall, early winter. And so we've been working on that very hard, and we developed guiding principles of what had to happen, what we needed to focus on. In order: number 1, health and safety; number 2, high quality instruction; number 3, flexibility; 4, equity; 5, accurate and timely communication; and 6, community trust. But we wanted to make sure that all of the others were important, but health and safety was number 1. So we've really, and it touches on a lot of these other areas. As we have seen studies come out in recent days about how COVID-19 is impacting students and families of color at higher rates than other students that are white or our administrators and teachers. And so having equity as a part of this and being very concerned about that has been a huge concern for us moving forward. So we established these district-wide committees and put in so many hours to prepare to get back to school. Had opportunities for community input and feedback. And so we really were working on that. Unfortunately, in late June and July, we saw a spike in cases. And we know that in our community and in JCPS, we have over 3,000 of our employees who are high risk, many more who live with someone who are high risk, and thousands of students that are in the high risk category for health concerns. And so it became a very difficult few weeks for us, like it has been for many districts all across this state and this country. But essentially, we made the decision, and I made the decision in collaboration with our board, and we've all been on the same page, that we could not risk the lives of staff and students by going back to school. We know that distance learning is not a replacement for in-person learning, but for us, and the amount of people we had that are high risk, we just could not accept the possibility of having a death within JCPS, whether that be students or staff. So we made that decision to start school on August 25th with NTI for 6 weeks, and hopefully getting back as soon as possible. Next slide. So as we look at NTI 2.0, and I won't go over all of this, I know I'm probably running late on time, but we're really looking at what we did well in the spring, and we're proud of a lot of that work, but what we can do better in the fall. So we are looking for more consistency across schools and levels. Parents told us that if they had a school and a teacher that were very active in communication, they were very pleased with what happened, and the vice versa. If the communication was not there on every single day, then they were not as pleased. So getting consistency across that, focusing on evidence-based practices, effective implementation and monitoring. We have 10 days of professional learning for our administrators and teachers, which is a huge thing for us. Obviously, getting connectivity to all of our families, Wi-Fi and Chromebooks, which we have really invested in to get every student with a Chromebook and every family who needs it connectivity. And then we're really focused on improving our customer service. During NTI, it was an issue for us in the spring because we clearly could not have personnel in schools. We have purchased a software program called Ring Central, where we can now every single teacher has their own cloud-based phone number that they can call students. Every school has a cloud-based number where it can go immediately to when someone calls the school, someone will always be able to answer that phone immediately, like they're at school. And this is a new service for us. Thanks to the CARES money, we have been able to do this and provide much better customer service for our families moving forward into NTI 2.0. Next slide, please. And I'll just run through some of these quickly. You can see, I just want to say how important it is to have accessing a device and internet connectivity. We have 10,000 of those hotspots, 30,000 of the Chromebooks, but I will say hotspots are a short-term answer. Together, we need to all look state, local, and all resources we can to really bridge that gap that we have, that digital divide that occurs in so many of our communities that is very evident in Jefferson County. But making sure we provide more synchronous instruction to our students on a regular basis. That's that live face-to-face instruction virtually. And then meeting all the needs of our kids, those with IEPs, English as a second language, gifted and talented, all of those things we want to make sure that we provide, and that's what our schools are working on right now in detailed plans. Next slide, please. We are also working very intently on racial equity. It's a focus of yours. It's a focus of ours. We want our schools to have those conversations. We know in Jefferson County, there is a lot of unrest, as there is across the nation right now. Our students and staff have been very active in the movements within the Jefferson County community. We want to support our kids. We want to make sure they have the ability to have the conversation, the curriculum, the more inclusive conversation. We want to have teachable moments for our kids and really dig into this work around racial equity in JCPS. We are one of 11 districts across America who had the courage to pass a racial equity policy. And we have really made progress. I told you about gifted and talented. We've made progress in hiring administrators. We've made small progress in teachers, but we've got a long way to go, but we've started making that progress. We've made progress in the curriculum, but we've got ways to go to really address achievement gaps and disproportionality. But I'm proud that JCPS has been willing to tackle this head on, as a lot of districts are just beginning the conversation. We are simply saying we've got to lean in more and push harder than we ever have before. Next slide. I've talked a little bit about communication and improving that customer service. We're going to have an app now, Connect app, which we can now talk to families in multiple languages. We're doing Facebook Live, video resources. I'm doing way too many press conferences, but I know that gets the message out, but glad to do that. We're going to do some kickoff. You know, we really want, it's hard in today's environment. Everyone that's been an educator on this knows there's nothing like the excitement about the start of a school year in schools and in the community. And it's difficult to do that in this environment, but we're going to do everything we can to really increase the energy and enthusiasm to start of school year. Our schools did a great job celebrating our kids at the end of the year, and we want to do the same to start the year. Next slide, please. So that's essentially, I know I've talked a great deal. Really proud of our work. I am. I know we got a ways to go in JCPS. We're continuing to do that tough, hard work. And I know, you know, we don't want to start virtually, but that's what we have to do. Like many other counties are making that tough decision. We're going to continue to push forward on the improvements that we are making in JCPS, and obviously look forward to you know, the future audit so that we know that you know, we can show off what we're doing well here. So that concludes my presentation. Happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thanks so much, Marty. This is your fourth meeting with us as the new board, and we've been really careful to stay inside the lanes required of the corrective action plan. And as you said, sometimes that's just about fixing 100 things. And but I know this board in particular has been really excited to get to the conversation today around teaching and learning, support for racial equity, and closing achievement gaps, and reopening schools as well. So let's take a few minutes to open up for some questions. I know Mrs. McCrary had one that she would like to pose.
Thank you, Chair Young. Thank you, Dr. Polio. I was intrigued by you mentioning that your district will be administering the map virtually. I'm interested in knowing how that can be done with fidelity.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously you want data that is valid and reliable, which is always difficult when you're having a kid take an assessment remotely. But NWEA, the company that administers MAP, provides us an opportunity to do it remotely. They've done it in other districts before. So, remembering that this isn't high stakes accountability, meaning that it's not for those type of decisions. Instead, it is to give us a snapshot of where a child is in reading and math, really based on their growth and their last score, and then us acting on that. So we don't want that to be the only data point we look at. It would be one data point. We would expect our teachers to obviously have more formative data points along the way, that they would triangulate that. So, if a student's data either way too low or way too high came out on MAP, we would expect our teachers to triangulate that data and say that might not be a valid data point and use that appropriately. And so just not a single data point, but it is a data point for us to use. And we think that, getting 90,000 kids taking MAP at least gives us a snapshot of where they are and what interventions we need to put in place individually.
Thank you. And Marty, I was really interested in and still more curious about your conversation with your board around the future state of Jefferson County Schools. So do you have a timeline on clarifying that new vision for the future, or how close is that to becoming a next steps effort?
Yeah, so we're in the process. So when we list out this, the 6 areas, and then there's about 4 or 5 areas under each one, many of them are well in development. So there's been a lot of discussion, and there'll be more. One of them was student assignment. I've been very clear about my concern about student assignment in JCPS and about the inequities that many of our West End families face, with the services that we provide at the schools, and that we only have one group of students that are forced to leave their community, and it's not their choice, and that's students in the West Louisville area. And so really looking at that, looking at magnets and ensuring that we have diversity in magnets, that we have more magnets that are robust. So student assignment is well on its way. Facilities is one we're working on right now. Another one, so for instance, when we talk about teacher and leadership development, for instance, we have put $1.2 million into our teacher residency program, which is to change the amount of African-American teachers we have in JCPS, where we actually work with the University of Louisville, certify our teachers. They're actually working as residents in our schools, and in 1 year they get a teacher certification. So those things are a part of it. We still have things, Lou, like one of them is 10,000 kids in summer learning. We were hoping to go from 1,000 to 3,000 this summer, but clearly we haven't been able to do that. So that will be a part of a future state. So, and also raising additional revenue to support this is a part of it. So, we're in the middle of that process right now too. So some of it is well on its way. Others we're still building, but we've been working hard to make those changes.
Thank you. Really, really important work. Thank you. And I'll toss it over to one last question to Dr. Robinson.
Good afternoon, Marty.
Good afternoon, Dr. Robinson.
I want to go back to your culture climate dimension of the plan and let you know, as you well know, that teachers and administrators working in some of your most challenging assignments are often feeling under the gun when they are facing some of these data points that reflect on the performance at the school. So there's a lot going on. Dr. Polio, I'm pleased to say that several of your new resident candidates came from your partnership with Simmons.
They sure did.
That's a big check mark. But how are we going to flip it so that those candidates training to work in challenging assignments know that that assignment comes by virtue of recognizing their knowledge and skill and their courage, and that their efforts are going to be supported based on data that shows how much more they need in order to get the job done rather than feel vilified?
Yeah, so couldn't agree with you more, Dr. Robinson. As you know, if you don't know, I was principal at Doss High School, which was a school that at the time was called Priority. We know that's changed to CSI. When I walked in the school, it was considered the second lowest performing high school in the state. There's a turnover rate, retention rate that they lost nearly 1 out of 4 teachers every single year. So when I walked into that school, I had to replace 30 teachers, hire 30 teachers that summer. That's not a sustainable model of turnaround when you are replacing that many teachers every single year. And you are exactly right. When schools are identified as failing, so to speak, that puts so much pressure on the faculty and staff. And I said this, that when I left Doss, I would put that faculty and staff up against anybody, any other faculty. We had gone from the second lowest performing school to about the 12th lowest performing school. We were proud of that, but it was still considered a priority school that many people would consider failing. So much of that is really how we as a state and what we put on schools. I am not in favor of any of those stamps putting on schools, but I have to focus on what we can do internally. And a part of that is our future state, Dr. Robinson. So first of all, we have to provide training and support. So right now, our board dedicated about $4 million a year to train out, we call them AIS, which are our CSI schools and a few others, but they are right now, they have 5 additional days of paid professional development. So as we speak right now, 3 weeks before we come back to school, all of our teachers are in training right now, all day training being paid for that. They will now have 10 more days, 15 total days of training. But I couldn't agree with you more. We need more resources in these schools. We need more mental health supports. We need more counselors. And finally, I'll say this, I am a proponent of differentiated pay for those that work in our highest need schools so that we can get more experienced teachers in our higher need schools, those that are still passionate about doing the work. So having our residents working right now in a classroom in our AIS schools, our highest need schools, but just not hiring brand new teachers, attracting our experienced teachers. And I think there is some incentive pay that needs to happen at a higher rate in those schools. And then we have to increase our supports. And I'll say it again, more counselors, more mental health. We put a mental health counselor in every school in JCPS, but for our AIS schools, that's just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, they need more supports, and that's what our teachers need. And so I'll say it. That's why I am asking for additional revenue in Jefferson County to go directly to our facilities and to our AIS schools. I have said we need $10 million more a year in our AIS schools. It has not been a popular move. I've been told by superintendents that the 2 ways that you can lose your job is by changing student assignment and increasing taxes. And I'm trying to do both during a pandemic. But I do believe it's the right thing to do for our teachers and our kids, and we can't wait 2 years. We must do that now. So I can't agree more with your premise. Everything I've just said supports everything you said in what we have to do to be successful.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you so much. And thank you for the additional time for some Q&A, Marty. Yeah, really appreciate it. Good luck as you move forward with reopening. We are rooting for you.
Thank you all. Appreciate your all support.
Thanks.
You got it.
The next item on our agenda is the presentation of the Grissom Award for Innovation in Special Education. And I believe our recipient is joining us. The late Dr. Johnny Grissom served at the KDE in the role of Associate Commissioner for the Office of Special Instructional Services. Johnny was a friend of mine, and it's such an honor to have this award in her name. She provided steadfast commitment, service, and leadership, striving to help all students achieve at high levels, regardless of their disabilities. This award is given each year to a Kentuckian or a Kentucky organization to honor continuing dedication to improving student achievement for students with disabilities. The 2020 recipient of the Grissom Award for Innovation in Special Education is Dr. Mark Martin of Meade County Schools. Congratulations, Mark. Let me also add my congratulations on your having recently become the superintendent of Meade County Schools. Those who nominated Dr. Martin shared that his core belief is that all children are regular education students first, regardless of their exceptionalities. While in his previous position as Director of Special Education, Mark implemented an innovative plan using co-teaching and supplemental resources to give students with disabilities access to the general education curriculum with their same age peers, while simultaneously addressing individual academic needs. The nominator, Mark's nominator, also shared that Dr. Martin leads by example, as he often can be found in the classrooms and providing meaningful professional development in engaging instructional practices and targeted interventions. All in all, Dr. Martin has a heart for all children. And as I work with school districts through UK around the state, I have often heard them say, Mark, that they've got to visit Meade County Schools to see what's happening in co-teaching, best practices there. So congratulations, Dr. Martin. And if you would, please unmute and share a word of greeting.
Thank you, Ms. Young. I appreciate it. Hello from Meade County. We are the proud home of new Kentucky Commissioner, Dr. Jason Glass.
That's right.
Former Green Wave. And we look forward to the work that your team is going to accomplish in the coming years. You know, Jason's parents were both teachers in Meade County Schools. His mom, Joanne, was a teacher at Painville Elementary and also a home ec teacher at our middle school. And his father, Jim, was a science teacher at our high school and an assistant football coach. There's a rich tradition of the Glass family in our community. And I want to thank the Board of Education for this recognition, but this is truly a team award. I have a few of my team members here with me. And our work started in 2014 with a shared belief that all means all. Our teachers, both regular education teachers, our special education teachers, our administrators, and staff have worked in a true professional learning community to identify barriers, build bridges, not walls, for students with disabilities. And we have branded special education in our district as an instructional first focus, and we embrace the process of innovation. And as you said, Ms. Young, we've had many educators ask to come visit our classrooms and hear about our journey over the last 6 years. So from March of 2019 to March of 2020, we've had over 800 educators from 61 school districts, the Kentucky Department of Education, and the University of Louisville, just to name a few, visit our school district. And we do this because we simply want to help educators help students. We want to make a difference with people that want to make a difference for students. And when you wake up every day and you try to do what's best for students, good things happen. Our teams pursue excellence with a servant's heart for children. Thank you so much for this recognition, and we wish all of you good luck as you lead in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. And if you'd like to introduce those masked superheroes behind you, feel free to take a moment to do that.
Well, we have a few right over my right shoulder. This is Miss Kellyanne Wilson, and she is our former Associate Superintendent of Instruction, and she was instrumental in really our model of the supervisor of instruction and the special ed director being attached at the hip. We believe that iron sharpens iron, and those two departments have to work side by side if we're going to make a difference for all. Model that from the district level. Then to her right, we have our former middle school principal, Mr. Chad Butler, and now our DPP. And beside Mr. Butler is our new special education director, Ms. Kara Esrae. She's one of the most talented young educators in the state. Beside her, former elementary principal, Ms. Donna Fashee, and now transportation director. As we come back over my left shoulder, we have Ms. Ricky Hanger, former principal at Flaherty Primary. She now works as an elementary curriculum instructional supervisor, and her school was one of our most successful schools. They went from 6 to 7 years ago being in the 6th percentile of schools with test scores, and via this model, as part of it, they were the 4th highest achieving school in the state of Kentucky the year before at Flaherty Primary. And then beside her, Ms. Gloria Bertrand, who has worked in a variety of roles over the last 6 years. She's currently the principal at Brandenburg Primary. She's also worked at the district office level. And then beside her, finally, Mr. Bill Adams, our Associate Superintendent of Personnel. But these are just a few of our team members. I wish we could have brought more, but, with social distancing and trying to, model that. But we just have a great team of people that truly serve children.
Well, Meade County is lucky to have you and that team. Kara, I don't envy you stepping into the Director of Special Education shoes that Mark left behind, but I'm sure all of you will be ready for the work ahead, and we'll be rooting for you for reopening as well. And before I close, I'll ask our our awards committee chair, Patrice McCrary, if she would like to add a word of congratulations with my thanks to Patrice and the committee for their work on the Grissom Award.
Thank you, Chair Young. Yes, I would. Congratulations, Dr. Martin. Reading through the application that was sent in was almost humbling to read it, to see the massively great things that are taking place within your county. I've had the good fortune of visiting and seeing it in person, and I agree with you 100%. This is a team effort, if ever I have seen one. Through your leadership, you have managed to bring about a group of people who are on the same page, whose primary focus is to do what is right for our children. And thank you for that. You are much appreciated, and congratulations on your recognition.
Thank you, Patrice. We appreciate you as well.
Congratulations. And Kevin and I were able to do this at the graduation ceremony of the Kentucky School for the Deaf, but here's a round of silent applause for us for your award. Congratulations, Superintendent Martin, and have a great, great school year ahead. Thank you.
Thank you.
And board members, at this time, we have, we're within 3 minutes of our scheduled 30-minute recess. So we will take that break. I would remind our viewers, online viewers, to return to the Media Live portal, the Media Portal Watch Live this afternoon for the second half of our meeting. Board members, I have 12:33. We will reconvene at 1:03. Enjoy a nice but short break.